They think they are free, but for how long? And, you know, what got me going on this was this new poll that just came out from CBS News, finding that roughly 2/3 of Americans approve of Donald Trump's actions so far and refer to him using the following 4 words: tough, energetic, focused, and effective. They think they are free. I mean, you know, white people approving of Trump's actions to marginalize minorities, gut the federal government, hack and sue media outlets and reporters. White people who think that that stuff is going to help them, you know, in some small marginal ways, they may be right. I mean, a return of white supremacy and the marginalization of women in the workplace and in politics, for example, may produce some small benefits for some small number of white men. But there's a huge price to be paid for this in terms of what we used to refer to as freedom. I mean, you know, Trump is going to have to do some serious stuff to reverse 100 years of progress on civil rights, women's rights, workers' rights. And he's going to eventually have to confront pushback from those groups. He's going to have to deny working people their right to organize unions or even be in unions. I mean, he tried this with his last administration when he put Eugene Scalia and, you know, Antonin Scalia's son, the right-wing lawyer who, you know, helps out with union busting, if my understanding of the reports are correct, as Secretary of Labor. And, you know, same thing this time around. I mean, he's got another anti-labor secretary. He's going to have to restrict the ability of poor and middle-class people to rise above their economic stations through education by keeping education, higher education, obscenely expensive. All of those things eventually harm the middle class, and he's already started on every one of them, but it gets worse than that. I mean, as our freedoms are taken away and our government is turned into a one-party state, governance that assists the majority of the people begins to vanish. The freedom of speech goes away. Eventually, society basically turns cold as Trump's authoritarianism hardens the national zeitgeist. Here's some examples of what he's already done. Politicians can only advance or even hold on to their offices if they unceasingly praise dear leader Trump. And now they've even taken this to FBI agents who won't get hired unless they say that, you know, on this form that January 6th was an inside job, the 2020 election was stolen from Trump, and the real patriots on January 6th were the rioters who killed police officers, not the police or politicians. Members of the media are facing life-destroying lawsuits if they criticize Trump or point out his successful prosecution for sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll. Those who support Trump no matter what get elevated, you know, in the press sections of the White House and the Pentagon. And legitimate mainstream media who might occasionally question him get kicked out. Wealthy oligarchs who support our dear leader get tax breaks, government contracts, and special legislation giving them immunities, and see the federal agencies that once regulated them gutted. Judges, prosecutors, and reporters who challenge or expose dear leader's criminality are doxxed, threatened, and attacked on social media, making their lives both miserable and dangerous. Now, we know how this usually turns out because we've seen this movie before. In the last 30, 40, 50 years, Putin's Russia, Orban's Hungary, Duterte's Philippines, Pinochet's Chile, Bukele's El Salvador, El Sisi's Egypt, Erdogan's Turkey, Chavez's Venezuela, Lukashenko's Belarus, Ortega's Nicaragua, Prayut's Thailand, Saeed's Tunisia, Modi's India. I mean, you know, we've seen this shift toward authoritarianism in all these countries. And almost a century ago, we saw it played out for the first time in modern history in Spain, Japan, Italy, and Germany. Back in the day, a fellow by the name of Milton Mayer, he was an American Jew of German ancestry. He was a brilliant writer. He worked for one of the major Chicago newspapers. I believe it was the Chicago Sun. But don't quote me on that. He went to Germany 7 years after Hitler's fall and befriended 10 average Germans, asking each one of them. And he wrote this book. They thought they were free about it. It was first published in 1955. So, you know, he asked them, doesn't a nation rise up and protest the destruction of its own democracy? Don't people pour into the streets? And this college professor that he interviewed said, You see, one doesn't see exactly where or how to move. Believe me, this is true. Each act, each occasion is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even talk alone. You don't want to go out of your way and make trouble. Why not? Well, you're not in the habit of doing it. And it's not just fear of standing alone that restrains you. It's also genuine uncertainty. So Mayer asks him, how do we know? Is there a sudden proclamation by dear leader that the country is now officially fascist? This is what the college professor told him. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next. Step C is not so much worse than step B, and if you didn't make it, why should you stop at C? And so on to D. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy. And some minor incident, in my case, it was my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, Jews, swine, collapses it all at once. And you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. And yet, Milton Mayer pointed out, everything seems normal. After all, your leader isn't coming after the people who don't challenge him. I mean, if you work your job, if you watch football, if you listen to music, if you ignore the news and don't speak out, everything seems fine. Dear leader even gets high levels of popularity. In 1938, Adolf Hitler was the most popular politician in the world. He was on the cover of Time magazine for that. Mayer's professor friend told him that when the dear leader finally seizes control of all the levers of power, from political to economic to spiritual, everything changes, but everything also stays the same. Quote, the world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring, the houses, the shops, the jobs, the meal times, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holiday. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. And now you live in a system which rules without responsibility, even to God. So here we are. Milton Mayer's professor friend said, how is this to be avoided among ordinary men, even highly educated ordinary men? And Milton Mayer had to answer, frankly, I don't know. Well, that was 1954. This is 2025. We now know. Trump's followers think that they're free. They're not. They're going to high price they're paying for his growing authoritarianism. Fascism, with its promises of efficiency and order and privileges for the racial majority, is, often popular at its early stages. By the time people figure out the scam, it's typically too late. So what do we do? Well, reach out to your elected representatives and demand resistance. Join movements like indivisible.org. Subscribe. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today is My Life in the Black Party. The title is Just Another N-Word, and it's by Field Marshal Don Cox, his life in the Black Panther Party. This is from Chapter 5, page 47. The chapter is titled, Use What You Got to Get What You Need. Before we entered into a direct relationship with the Panthers, our group had wanted to prove our worthiness by our actions. Since that was no longer in question, contact was made and a rendezvous fixed to meet at Huey's Pad on Telegraph Avenue in Oakland. I don't remember much about that first gathering, other than meeting David Hilliard, the Panther Party's chief of staff, for the first time. The only thing that stands out in my memory is a question from Huey as we were sipping coffee. He asked if I didn't think it better to be properly equipped before going into action. He suggested it was best to first rip off the necessary funds to get everything we needed in advance of launching a major effort. I had practically memorized his essay, The Correct Handling of a Revolution, in which he spoke of teaching by example. And so I blurted out the first thing that came to mind, which was, use what you got to get what you need. After a long, hot summer of 1967, with the rebellions in Newark, Detroit, and elsewhere, we felt that our preparations had, at least, put us on the same level as the rest of the country, and that the revolution would not pass us by. Our San Francisco group started attending and participating in any and all functions relevant to black people. And we tried to let everyone in our area, and we tried to get to know everyone in our area associated with the struggle. We also continued our community meetings. News of the death of Che Guevara in October of that year had us walking around in a stupor for a while, and although that came as a severe blow to the international struggle for freedom and justice of all people, we were proud to be among those who had responded to his battle cry and had picked up the fallen arms. Huey asked if we would conduct a meeting on Hunter's Point for him. He was supposed to go, but something had come up and he couldn't make it. We were honored that he thought enough of us to ask, and we were more than enthusiastic to do whatever he wanted. It was at that meeting that we had a new, surprising experience. We met our first resistance in the form of Adam Rogers. He was supposed to have been the biggest, baddest N-word on Hunter's Point, but when we encountered him, he came across like an Uncle Tom. He seemed to be impressed with our firearms demonstration, but he was violently against the idea of black people arming themselves for self-defense. He was convinced that would increase repression, even though history proved him wrong. When we examined the history of repression of black people, the only time there was significant decline in police violence and murders perpetrated against blacks was precisely the period when blacks were organized and had access to guns. Given the wave of terror and violence against blacks that continues to sweep the country, I truly believe there is a lesson to be learned from that fact. Rogers was one of the wounded in the Hunters Point Rebellion of the year before, and a photograph of him had been used by the news media to illustrate articles on the riots that broke out following the killing of a black teenager by police that September. Because of that, we were even more surprised by his reaction. It was not until later that we discovered that the administration of San Francisco Mayor Joseph Alito had sent in money after the rebellion and had bought off the so-called bad N-words. The same technique was used from coast to coast. Despite Rogers, most everyone seemed to like what we had to say and really related to the firearms demonstration. Several people wanted to take courses in handling weapons, and so I fixed a rendezvous for the following Saturday at the parking lot of the abandoned shopping center right on top of Hunters Point. The next day I arrived at the point at 7 in the morning in order to get set up before people began to gather. There wasn't going to be any target practice, but I would be firing a few shots in the air by way of demonstration. I knew that would pose no problem as far as the police were concerned. Due to their racism, whenever they heard shots on the point, they generally looked the other way. Once, during a dispute between two gangs, shooting broke out, and instead of police coming in to break it up, they sealed off the area and let them shoot it out. The gun battle lasted 24 hours, and the police didn't return until the next day. At around 8 o'clock, I saw David Hilliard's car driving up, which I found surprising because we had only seen each other a couple of times before. As the car approached, I recognized Emory Douglas and George Murray. Everyone had strange looks on their faces that made it clear that something was wrong. Damn. Huey had been shot and captured. He had shown up at David's wounded and bleeding heavily. There was real concern for his life, so David drove him to the hospital and left him on the steps, then drove straight to San Francisco to find me. He said Huey had asked him to ask me to help out in the aftermath, specifically dealing with the passenger who had been in Huey's car at the time of the shootout with Officer John Frey of the Oakland Police, who'd been killed. There was also the problem of the guns Huey had stockpiled. I'll never understand why David didn't just bring the guns with him, but he hadn't, and I was obliged to go back into the area, get everything, and get back out safely. That might sound easy, but the shootout had occurred less than 3 hours before, and there was one policeman dead and one seriously wounded, so it was hot over in Oakland, to say the least. There was no time to go by the house and unload the guns I had on hand for the training, so I followed David back to Oakland with a trunk full of weapons. David took me into the backyard of a house that had a lot of weeds and a stack of old lumber in which he had stashed the gun. In his state of excitement, he couldn't remember exactly where the pistol was, and while we were looking, an elderly black woman came out of the house next door and asked what we were doing. David kept searching and didn't look up. She then said, "If you don't come out of there, I'm going to call the police." I began to panic and told David to say something to the woman. When he rose up, she recognized him and calmed down. This was David's house, and she was his neighbor. On the one hand, I was relieved, but on the other, if the police were looking for the passenger who'd been with Huey, it was certain they wouldn't miss David's house, as both were known Panthers. Finally, he found the gun, and it continues from there.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, it's supposed to be snowing here today, but so far I'm not seeing it. Happy Thursday. Bowing to the butcher, Trump grovels to Putin and promises to abandon Ukraine. How is this not treason? Hegseth is over in NATO going, oh yeah, we're going to give Putin whatever he wants, and no, Ukraine can't join NATO, and screw y'all. It's incredible. Also, if Trump simply ignores the high court, is that the end of law? Robert Reich wants to know. And where are the protesters now? This is an amazing question. I'll share this with you in the first hour here. And thank God for Bernie. He's starting a Trump Pushback tour. I wish every Democrat would be doing this. I'll tell you about that in this first hour. In the second hour of our program, our one guest for the day, Phil Ittner, is going to drop by with an update on what's going on in Ukraine. He'll be live from Kyiv, Ukraine. Also, Louisiana is trying to extradite a New York doctor. These Republicans will stop at nothing to punish women for getting abortions. In fact, they're threatening her. Well, I'll tell you all about it in the next hour. Republicans also finally reveal how they'll pay for their tax cuts for the rich. And Musk's dodgy crew just straight up took $80 million out of a New York City bank account. Isn't that called theft? In the third hour of our program, the State Department planning to give Musk's Tesla $400 million for armored Tesla cars. Of course they are. But, you know, hey, it just vanished from the website after Rachel Maddow pointed it out last night. We'll talk about that. And a recipe for extinction. Can the USS Nature Protection survive Trump and his God Squad? What's the God Squad? I'll tell you about that in the third hour of the program. But to start out, what happened yesterday? Donald Trump had a long phone conversation with Vladimir Putin, apparently an hour and a half long, in which Putin gave him his marching orders. And Trump just, bent over and metaphorically, obviously it was a telephone call, kissed Putin's ass. In my opinion, this is treason. I mean, this is the betrayal of our Democratic allies has officially begun. And Putin, this butcher, played Trump like a fiddle at a country fair. He even fed him his own words, common sense. Trump was bragging, oh yeah, Putin used my favorite phrase, common sense. Yeah, you think? The guy is an expert on psychological warfare. He used to run the Russian intelligence service in East Germany. Let's be clear. Russia invaded Ukraine, just like Hitler invaded Poland, just like Japan invaded China, and those led to millions of deaths, a world war, and eventually, to prevent a repeat, the creation of NATO. And now Trump and Hegseth are saying right out loud that they're going to give Putin, who's losing this war, by the way, and suffering massive casualties, and it's brought his economy to its knees. He's got like 17 or 18% inflation, hundreds of thousands of casualties. Putin wants out of this war, and Trump and Hegseth just said, okay, we'll give you everything you want, Vlad. Just keep those trolls on social media loving Republicans, and we'll give you what you want. It's amazing. No giving back to Ukraine the mineral-rich lands that Russia has stolen. No NATO or defense guarantees for Ukraine. This is particularly egregious since Russia has violated the Budapest Memorandum, which we've talked about before, the 1994 agreement that Bill Clinton negotiated that promised that if Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, they had the world's third largest stash of nukes, that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, then Russia would not invade. No punishment for Russia for invading a peaceful neighbor and murdering tens of thousands of innocent civilians. No retribution for Russia stealing over 100,000 Ukrainian children and trafficking them into Russia, the only country in the world where child porn is legal. No return of those children to their parents and their country. Trump telling the world that territorial acquisition by force is now again acceptable. Trump even blamed Ukraine for, quote, going to war as if this was all their fault. Trump spoke well of Putin, a murderous thug, and then quoted Putin's lie that Zelensky isn't polling well in his own country. Right, like Gallup is over there doing reasonable polls. Give me a break. Trump wouldn't even call Ukraine a partner with the U.S. in negotiations. This is going to be entirely between him and Putin. And then Trump says he's going to go to Russia or maybe Saudi Arabia to meet Putin in person so he can kiss his ass in person. This is treason, both against the United States and against democracies all across the world. It's a complete repudiation of the world order established after World War II that was specifically designed to end the kinds of territorial seizure that could lead to another world war. I mean, Trump actually said yesterday, quote, Russia fought for that land in Ukraine and lost a lot of men doing it, so they should just keep it. And our defense secretary backed him up. When aggressive countries invade and steal territory, that's just fine, Trump says. No penalty. Keep what you got, no matter how many people you have to kill to get it. After all, Ted Cruz led a Senate inquiry yesterday into how America might seize Greenland. Honest to God, not a word about helping Ukraine, of course. Seizing Greenland, possibly by force. Trump is trying to turn us into Russia. This is the kind of insanity that leads to another world war or the destruction of the United States of America. Is that his goal? Is Putin running America now? Is he the one who told Elon Musk to destroy our federal government the same way he told him not to let Starlink help Ukraine attack the Russian fleet in Crimea? This now power-drunk Trump is saying that he wants to do in Greenland, Canada, and Mexico what Putin did to Ukraine. This is a treacherous betrayal of American ideals, American history, and of every person who has ever served or loved this country. It's worse than what Neville Chamberlain did when he cut a deal with Hitler, because we can all see where this is going today, while Chamberlain couldn't. It's approaching what Vidkun Quisling did in Norway and Pétain did in Vichy, France. It's spitting in the face of our founders and the million-plus American soldiers who fought and died in multiple wars to establish and preserve democracy here in Asia and in Europe. No other American president or defense secretary would have ever said such a thing, would have ever betrayed an ally, because we've never had a traitor as a president before. There's no other way to describe it. You know, I get it. The most common technical definition of treason requires, support for an enemy during time of war. But war is when a country is under assault. What Trump and Musk are doing against America right now can only legitimately be called warfare. People are dying right now because USAID was shut down. The toll could be in the millions. Parents are watching their children die as you are listening to me right now. Human beings grieving, sobbing, vowing revenge. And if it's not legally treason, it sure as hell is morally treason. Russia and China are delighting. Two countries have already declared their intention to shift their loyalty from America to China because of the loss of USAID. More are going to follow. Trump is literally handing other countries to China and to Russia. And this after our NATO allies gave their soldiers lives to fight alongside us in Afghanistan and Iraq after Bush and Cheney lied us into those wars. And what does Trump say to those European allies? Screw off. Now, France, Germany, Poland, Italy, Spain, and the UK just yesterday, in part in response to this, signed a joint statement vowing to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and demanding a role in the peace talks. Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, said, quote, "The next task is to ensure that there is no dictated peace." John Healey, the UK Secretary of Defense, said, "There can be no negotiation about Ukraine without Ukraine." Trump, though, says, we're not going to join him in defending Ukraine. He wants Putin to dictate the fate of Ukraine. This is just treason. And where are the Democrats right now? Am I the only one in America saying this out loud? I mean, can you imagine how Republicans would react if Joe Biden had done the same or held a press conference with George Soros in the Oval Office doing all the talking? He'd be impeached in a week. It'd be on the nonstop news every hour for days. What the hell is going on here? Isn't it obvious? And now we hear the Democrats in leadership are upset because voters are calling them and loudly demanding that they stand up to Trump, Musk, and Putin. And the Kash Patel is organizing or orchestrating a plan to gut the FBI. The FBI, the one agency charged with finding Russian spies in America, Kash Patel wants to gut that even before he's put in charge? I'm at a complete loss for words. I've never before seen such a horror in my life, and I frankly never expected to see it here. Or that our media would pretend it's normal, and that reporters in the Oval Office wouldn't even try to ask tough questions for fear of being expelled. If America doesn't react soon and strongly, this is the death of our 240-year experiment, the death of freedom, the death of democracy, for most likely a generation, and maybe even the start of a third world war. Raise some hell. They haven't finished yet. There may still be some time. I'll be right back. 16 minutes past the hour. Stay with me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Speaking the truth, the multinational corporations and the Trump administration would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back. And welcome back. Victoria in Olympia, Washington. Hey, Olympia, what's on your mind? Excuse me, Victoria, what's on your mind today?
Well, I could talk forever about Trump's New World Order, but I think you opened with that and did your wonderful job, as always. On a smaller scale, I want to talk about the Trump ugliness and how it affects the poor in this country. We certainly know he's coming from Medicaid, SNAP, and all the other programs that assist people. But he's already moved on a program for low-income energy assistance for people. There's a grant program called, well, it's LIHEAP, that provides a credit to one's power bill if you're low income. Mm-hmm. In my case, I'm in my 80s. I live on Social Security, $1,800 a month. And so I was awarded $475 credit to my power account this year. Now, this allows me to keep my thermostat at about 65 degrees a day, which is wonderful. But I guess Trump doesn't figure people need to be warm during the winter. And yeah, we're getting snow here too. So he has now written an order that this funding be rescinded. And people are receiving letters that state that the credit to their account will be taken back and you will be billed for any energy costs you've already used.
Whoa.
So one more hit.
So this is a federal program for low-income people.
It's a federal program. It's capital letters LIHEAP. I have no idea.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders used to talk about that. I think it's called LIHEAP, which is a terrible acronym. I remember what it was passed.
Yeah, it really is. That's why I didn't know how to pronounce it. You originally go through your Community Action Council, which is a county-wide program, at least here in the state of Washington. And you apply to them, and they access your records, et cetera, and based on your income, which I say mine is Social Security, they award you a certain amount of credit. Right. In my case, $475.
Now, is this administered by? I realize it's a federal program, but is it administered by the states or is it administered by the federal government? Who did you get the letter from?
Well, I assume the states, because you go to your county community office, Community Action Council. They help with all kinds of assistance, apparently, to people. This is the only assistance that I get. So,
who did you get the letter from?
Delighted.
saying that you had to give the money
I
back?
haven't gotten the letter yet, but I have a friend in Colorado who's gotten the letter, and I heard on MSNBC last night that people in Alabama have gotten the letter, and apparently it's just starting to claw back their money, our credit.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's our tax dollars.
Yeah, well, isn't it now? And I have paid taxes for years, not anymore because I don't earn anything anymore. But anyway, I thought people should be made aware of it so they can turn their thermostat down now and freeze their asses off. Excuse my language.
No, it's quite all right. Yeah, get ready. It's the
Yeah, well,
predators
get
are
ready
coming.
for everything. I mean, I have friends with kids on SNAP. You know that's going. You know Medicaid's going.
Yeah. Victoria, I got to run, but thank you for the heads up on
Thank
this.
you, and thank you for everything.
I appreciate it. Good talking with you. Thanks so much for the call. It's 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, Reaganomics. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out.
In a gilded hall under chandeliers bright, Trump bows low in the dead of night. Before the butcher, he bends his knee, selling out land, trading loyalty. Maps are burning, borders fade, freedom's price has been betrayed. A deal is struck with blood and lies, a traitor's oath in tyrant's eyes. Bowing to the butcher, hands stained red, treason drips from the words he said, turning his back on the brave and the free, trading their hope for his vanity.
Quarterback, 23 minutes past the hour. Trump is the most lawless president in American history, writes former Labor Secretary Robert Reich. He points out that there have been multiple judges now who have ordered Trump to restore funding to programs that Elon Musk has shut down, and none of them have been restored yet. Trump is absolutely currently, right this minute, as we speak, unless there's some news report that Robert Reich and I are unaware of, defying court orders. That is the definition of a constitutional crisis. That is the definition of defying the U.S. Constitution. One man defying the United States Constitution. Now, eventually, one of these cases, and probably multiple cases, are going to end up at the Supreme Court, probably in the next few weeks. If he defies the Supreme Court, it goes from being a constitutional crisis to being the end of America. Robert Reich is very concerned, so am I. Interesting question, Pro Writer 101 over on Daily Kos, asking, where are the protesters now? Remember when Netanyahu was bombing the crap out of Gaza, there were all these young people on campuses all across the country out protesting the genocide. Well, now Donald Trump has said, hey, let's just take all those Palestinians and move them someplace else. In other words, ethnic cleansing. Genocide and ethnic cleansing. And not a single protest. Why is that? Why is there not a single protest in the Arab community in Detroit or in Dearborn, in Michigan? There's on the campuses. Where are those students at Columbia University? Is it that they were cowed by being attacked by the police, et cetera, and kicked out of their colleges last time around? Or is it that the protests were actually, yes, they were, legitimate concerns about what Israel is doing. What if those protests were actually ginned up by Russian bots on social media to help Donald Trump get elected? I mean, who got hurt by those protests? It was Kamala Harris. She was the one who got hurt. She was defending Joe Biden, who was defending Netanyahu. And, we now know several million, an estimated 5 million people who had voted for Joe Biden in the previous election just didn't even bother to show up. And the most common reason why they say they didn't bother to show up is Gaza. Were those protests being driven by Elon Musk, by the algorithm on Twitter, by the Internet Research Bureau paid for by Vladimir Putin? How come we had protests then and we're having no protests now? What am I missing here? What do you think? Do you think that the students got manipulated? Now, having been a student protester myself at one point in time, I totally get it. You see injustice, you see, the government doing things wrong, you get out in the streets. So why aren't they out there now? What's going on? What am I missing here? I think it's an amazing question. Meanwhile, Senator Bernie Sanders is kicking off a Trump Pushback tour. I'll tell you about that after the break, and I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us. It's 27 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann program. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's talk media for the sane among us. Stay tuned. Today, we're reading from Elon Papp's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This is from the preface. It's titled The Red House. The Red House was a typical early Tel Avivian building, the pride of the Jewish builders and craftsmen who toiled over in the 1920s. It had been designed to house the head office of the local Workers' Council. It remained such until toward the end of 1947, it became the headquarters of the Haganah, the main Zionist underground militia in Palestine. Located near the sea on Yarkon Street in the northern part of Tel Aviv, the building formed another fine addition to the first Hebrew city on the Mediterranean, the White City, as its literati and pundits affectionately called it. For in those days, unlike today, the immaculate whiteness of his houses still bathed the town as a whole in the opulent brightness so typical of Mediterranean port cities of that era and that region. It was a sight for sore eyes, elegantly fusing Bauhaus motifs with native Palestinian architecture in an admixture that was called Levantine, in the least derogatory sense of the term. Such too was the Red House, its simple rectangular features graced with frontal arches that framed the entrance and supported the balconies of its two upper stories. It was either its association with the workers' movement that had inspired the adjective red, or its pinkish tinge that it acquired during sunset that had given the house its name. The former was more fitting, as the building continued to be associated with the Zionist version of socialism when, in the 1970s, it became the main office for Israel's kibbutzim movement. Houses like this, important historical remnants of the mandatory period, prompted UNESCO in 2003 to designate Tel Aviv as a World Heritage Site. Today, the house is no longer there, a victim of development, which has razed this architectural relic to the ground to make room for a car park next to the new Sheraton Hotel. Thus, in this street, too, no trace is left of the White City, which it has slowly transmogrified into the sprawling, polluted, extravagant metropolis that is the modern Tel Aviv. In this building on a cold Wednesday afternoon, 10 March 1948, a group of 11 men, veteran Zionist leaders, together with young military Jewish officers, put the final touches on a plan for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That same evening, military orders were dispatched to the units on the ground to prepare for the systematic expulsion of Palestinians from vast areas of the country. The orders came from a detailed description of the methods to be employed to forcibly evict the people: large-scale intimidation, laying siege to and bombarding villages and population centers, setting fire to homes, properties, goods, expulsion, demolition, and finally planting mines among the rubble to prevent any of the expelled inhabitants from returning. Each unit was issued with its own list of villages and neighborhoods as the targets of the master plan. Codenamed Plan D, Dalet in Hebrew, this was the fourth and final version of less substantial plans that outlined the fate the Zionists had in store for Palestine and consequently for its native population. The previous three schemes had articulated only obscurely how the Zionist leadership contemplated dealing with the presence of so many Palestinians living in the land that the Jewish national movement coveted as its own. This fourth and last blueprint spelled it out clearly and unambiguously. Quote, "The Palestinians have to go," end quote. In the words of one of the first historians to note the significance of that plan, Simcha Flapan, the military campaign against the Arabs, including the conquest and destruction of the rural areas, was set forth in the Haganah's Plan Dalet. The aim for the plan was in fact the destruction of both the rural and urban areas of Palestine. As the first chapters of this book will attempt to show, this plan was both the inevitable product of the Zionist ideological impulse to have an exclusively Jewish presence in Palestine, and a response to developments on the ground once the British cabinet had decided to end the mandate. Clashes with local Palestinian militias provided the perfect context and pretext for implementing the ideological vision of an ethnically cleansed Palestine. The Zionist policy was first based on retaliation against Palestinian attacks in February of 1947, and it transformed into an initiative to ethnically cleanse the country as a whole in March of 1948. Once the decision was taken, it took 6 months to complete the mission. When it was over, more than half of Palestine's native population, close to 800,000 people, had been uprooted. 531 villages had been destroyed, and 11 urban neighborhoods had been emptied of their inhabitants. The plan decided upon on 10 March 1948, and above all its systematic implementation in the following months, was a clear-cut case of ethnic cleansing operation regarded under international law today as a crime against humanity. After the Holocaust, it has become impossible to conceal large-scale crimes against humanity. Our modern communication-driven world, especially since the upsurge of electronic media, no longer allows human-made catastrophes to remain hidden from the public eye or to be denied. And yet one such crime has been erased almost totally from the global public memory: the disposition of the Palestinians in 1948 by Israel. This, the most formative element in the modern history of the land of Palestine, has ever since been systematically denied and is still today not recognized as an historical fact, let alone acknowledged as a crime that needs to be confronted politically as well as morally. Ethnic cleansing is a crime against humanity, and the people who perpetrate it today are considered criminals to be brought before special tribunals. It may be difficult to decide how one ought to refer to or deal with in the legal sphere those who initiated and perpetrated ethnic cleansing in Palestine in 1948. But it's impossible to reconstruct their crimes. Anyhow, it continues the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And then he goes through the whole process there. Confessions of a rogue nuclear... Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
They came for the truth, they came for the law, firing the ones who exposed what they saw. Silence the press, rewrite the past. History tells us this happens fast. Falling like dominoes, freedom erased. The playbook's been written, the moves are in place. Fascists don't wait, they tighten the chains, and once they are locked, you won't break away. Last chance to stop a dictatorship. Last chance before we lose our grip. He knows the game, he's making his move. If we don't fight, we're gonna lose. It starts with the purge, it ends with control. They steal your voice, they steal your soul. Last chance to stop a dictatorship, and Trump knows it. The FBI warned, the judges stood tall. One by one, they're making them fall.
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders is starting a tour of Midwestern states. He's starting out in Nebraska and in Omaha, Nebraska, and then he's going on to Iowa City. And he's going to take on Elon Musk. He says Musk is a threat to working class people. He says Americans might not yet understand how close we are to authoritarianism, oligarchy, and kleptocracy. I think this is brilliant. What I want to know is, why is Bernie the only senator doing this? Why is Bernie the only Democrat who is starting a national tour to point out the crimes, and they are crimes, that Trump and Musk are committing right out in front of us, right in front of God and the whole world? Where are the rest of the Democrats? There was a piece on Democratic Underground yesterday talking about how there was this meeting in Washington, D.C. of Democratic members of the House of Representatives with Hakeem Jeffries, and they were all complaining about all the phone calls they're getting from us. They want us to do something. What can we do? I don't know what do they expect from us? Yeah. You know, what is the old saying? You know, stand, lead, or get out of the way, or there's something like that. I mean, I'm increasingly disgusted. I'm very happy that we have a handful of people. Right, we've got 3 or 4 senators who are standing up and speaking out loudly. You know, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Coons, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren. We've got a handful of people in the House of Representatives who are speaking out, but they're few and far between. So what's on your mind? George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. Hey, George, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you? You're absolutely right. You know, we can't betray Ukraine because our, Western European, the industrial strength of the military power to aid Ukraine or oppose Russia without U.S. power backing them up. And Ukraine and our Western allies have to be part of any negotiations that determine Ukraine's fate. You know, you mentioned Munich 1938. Remember, British Prime Minister Chamberlain, French Premier Daladier, and Hitler reached an agreement to hand Sudetenland back to Germany without Czechoslovakia being part of the negotiation. Afterwards, they invited the Czech president there and said, sign the deal or else. They just presented it as a fait accompli.
Yep. And Chamberlain went back to Europe and said, we have established peace for our time.
Yeah, and Hitler promised, I only want the territories that have German-speaking ethnic populations. Said, after that, I don't want any more. That's the extent of my territorial demands.
Right.
And in March of 1939, he occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France didn't do a thing, although France had a mutual defense pact with Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, it's like history is being repeated here, George.
Exactly, right. You bet.
Not good. It's not good. How do you expect this to play out? I mean, you're a Russia expert. You speak Russian. You used to work in intelligence.
I don't think Putin and Trump can reach a deal because Ukrainians will never agree to it. Yeah. After they've suffered 3 years and gone to all lengths to defend their country, and like you said, suffering hundreds of thousands of casualties and having their children kidnapped, they're not going to agree to that.
Yeah.
Unless
but
unless Russia and Trump can force them to accept the deal. I just don't see it in the, our NATO European allies aren't going to agree to any kind of a deal either.
Yeah, but you just said that Europe doesn't have the military infrastructure to defend Ukraine. Are you sure of that?
I think, like I said, I think I read somewhere where Russia produces more artillery shells in a month than all our Western European allies, produce in a year. It would take them years to build up their industrial capacity.
Yeah.
And besides, they don't have the numbers to oppose Russia.
Yeah. Wow.
As far as their armed forces go.
But, I mean, there's, 800 million people in the European Union, and what's the population of Russia? Isn't it, 120 million or something?
150, but, yeah, but, the Russian armed forces so much, outnumber the European armed forces without us backing them up. It's not the population, it's how many people you have in your armed forces.
Do you think this has the possibility?
The European allies have scrimped for years on building up their defenses.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to economize and, they didn't want to put a lot of money into defense, and give up their social
Yeah, instead they put it into
welfare
healthcare and educating their young people.
Exactly. Right.
So do you think that there's a possibility that this might trip into a new land war in Europe?
You bet.
Beyond what it is already?
Sure think it could, because I think if, Putin gets, the eastern province of Ukraine are mainly Russian-speaking, and that was Hitler's justification for giving the Sudetenland. He said, those are mainly Russian-speaking. If he gets that, and neutralizes Ukraine, he's going to test Article 5 by, trying to, some provocations to get the Baltic states or Poland. So it could lead to World War III, just like, Munich led to World War II.
Yeah, I think his next step would be the Transnistria in Moldova. What do you think?
Definitely. I'm trying to remember whether Moldova is part of the NATO alliance. If it isn't, that wouldn't.
Don't believe it
trigger
is, but I'm not sure.
I can't remember. Kind of hazy.
Right. Let me just ask here. DOVA.
Yeah, right. Definitely. The Baltic states and Poland would trigger Article 5, but I can't remember whether Moldova is part of NATO or not.
It is not part of NATO. It is.
So that wouldn't trigger Article 5. So he'd probably get away with that, without a NATO response.
Yeah,
he'd have to do something that would trigger Article 5.
That was my thought, and it's right there on the border with Poland.
Yeah, the Baltic states would be the easiest ones because they're so. Their armed forces so minuscule compared to Russia.
Well, their populations are minuscule. I mean, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, each one of those countries is only about 5 million people.
At least put together, right, exactly.
Yeah. So, George, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. I always appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Same here, Tom, and keep up the good work. And once again, kudos to Matteo.
Okay. Thank you, George. Good talking to you. Devon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hey, Devon, what's up?
Hey, Tom, this is a bit of an SOS. You might recall I started calling the show about 15 years ago regarding the Radford Army ammunition plant, which is operated for a profit by BAE Systems. So ProPublica eventually did an article that lays it all out. It's called Open Burns, Ill Winds. It was published in 2017 by ProPublica. Last night, I got an email from Facebook saying that they're deleting the Facebook page for environmental patriots of the New River Valley due to copyright violations. And on that Facebook page are copies of slides that BAE put up at meetings when they were talking about how they were going to burn less chromium. They actually weren't going to burn more chromium because it was less per burn. I mean, just crazy stuff that they're still doing, by the way. And I need someone with technological expertise to go in there and download everything from that page that Facebook is about to delete. Because there's a lot of incriminating information about BAE Systems and the United States Army and how they work into cahoots to poison the people.
Well, I
So,
would encourage you to do that, Devon. That company, you probably the reason Facebook is doing it is because they've been threatened. That company is very litigious. They sued Randy Rhoads, one of my colleagues, some years ago. And, Randy fought back and won as I recall, won the lawsuit. This was when Air America was around. And I think it's that company. I may be wrong. I mean, you fact check me on this. But,
they're filthy rich.
yeah, they're yes. Some very large corporations here. Devon, thanks for the call. Good luck. And maybe somebody listening will get in there and download the data. It's, 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Octavia in Parker, Colorado. Hey, Octavia, what's up?
Greetings, Tom. Hi. So it is well known that Ukraine has the sunflower as their flower of the citizens.
They also grow a lot of them.
Yes, they do. And sunflower seed oil is a huge export, and we see it on our store shelves.
Yep.
I propose that we in the United States, we adopt the dandelion. And my rationale for that...
Officinalis.
Yes, indeed. And my rationale for this is that it grows in all 50 states. And when fully matured and fully formed, it spreads seeds of ideas far and wide. And of course, when asked, we can just say we're dandy. But my rationale for that is that in the 1940s, there was an Italian song sung by the patrons of Italy called Ciao Bella Ciao. And in that, there's a line that states, what is the flower of del partigiano, of the citizens who died for liberty? And that got me thinking. And so I truly believe the dandelion the beautiful aspect of the Ukraine adopting the sunflower is that me here in Parker, Colorado, we grow sunflowers. And I think of Ukraine, and I can stand by Ukraine by just holding up a flower.
That's
and
great.
the dandelion could absolutely be that. And I adore Bernie Sanders, and we need a million more like him. But in the end, he's a citizen of the United States. And if Tag Your It is the theme of the day, the theme of the year, the theme of the decade, I propose the dandelion.
Okay. Well, yeah, I like it. I like the idea. As I said, the botanical name is Taraxacum officinalis. I always loved that name. It's Taraxacum is like Tyrannosaurus Rex. So anyway, I love dandelions. Octavia, thank you very much for the call. That's great. Ed in Chicago. Hey, Ed, what's on your mind today?
Well, synchronicity. You just mentioned Randy Rhoads, and the reason I'm calling is because yesterday she was talking about Elon Musk, and she put something so brilliantly simple, as she often does. And this is what she said. If you're looking to cut waste, you bring in an auditor, not someone who writes code.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish we could make that a meme to every Democratic representative everywhere, so it's their first things out of their mouth anywhere. It's brilliant, it's simple, it's to the point, it's easy to understand. And again, I'll repeat it. If you're looking to cut waste, you bring in an auditor, not some who writes code.
Right. He's not looking to cut waste. He's looking for control.
Oh,
he
yeah.
has
we all
essentially
know that,
taken over the government of the United States. And having his little kid in the Oval Office telling Trump to shut up, it was just breathtaking. I mean, you're not the president. Shut up, or words to that effect.
Out of the mouth of babes. But, you're talking about the Democrats are always looking. You're not always looking, but trying to get them to give them a short and concise talking point. There it is.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: Trump knows that if Elon Musk tweaks the algorithm on X, he can destroy Trump. Trump could go down in flames. Elon Musk has so much power right now. He's got not just the financial power to destroy any politician, he also has the social media power to destroy any politician, including the President of the United States. So he can walk into the Oval Office and have his little kid tell Trump, hey, you're not the president, get the hell out of here. And everybody just laughs because, hey, everybody's scared to death of him. Ed, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Spot on. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's, what is it? Just about 10 minutes before the hour. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost, that is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
City on a crisp fall day, a mystery unfolded in the strangest way. Robert Kennedy Jr. with the prank to play left the bear cub's body in the park's dismay. Bear with me, the stories wild and strange, from the Hudson Valley to the city's range. A tale of pranks and politics entwined. Will justice find its way or remain confined? Will justice find its way or remain confined? Robert Kennedy Jr. with a smile so sly revealed the secret he kept but why. A joke gone wrong, a bear in the park, a story that left a lasting mark. Bear with me, the stories wild and strange, from the Hudson Valley to the city's range. A tale of pranks and politics entwined.
That's me dating myself. All right, back to your calls. Bob in University Place, Washington. Hey, Bob, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I have about had it up to here with the progressive media. I mean, it's all about, whenever I tune in, it's all about the outrage of the day, and there's nothing about what we can do about it. So my question for you is, why isn't the progressive media talking about any organizations that are out there that are, their goal is to fight Trump and to stop him?
Yeah, I see an awful lot of discussion about, groups that are working against Trump. Indivisible gets mentioned often, also on this program. Rachel Maddow opened her program last night with, a summary of all the protests that were going on all around the country. I don't think it's that defeatist, Bob. I really don't. Thanks for the call. Mark in South Bend, Indiana. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Talking with you today. Yeah, Lawrence O'Donnell last night on his show had about the audit that was done to the U.S. aid, and there was a $57,000 audit issue that wasn't explained or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a $40 billion organization having a $57,000 audit.
Yeah, this was the one example that Carolyn Leavitt, the White House press secretary, was able to point to of waste, fraud, or abuse at USAID. 57 grand. It's pennies. I mean, it's chump change out of a $40 billion budget.
It is, Tom, and and I know in the third hour you're going to talk. You're going to bring up about, the ultimate goal is to just downsize everything, the government of the commons, of the people, and
to pay for the tax cuts for billionaires.
Exactly, and the two things again, you brought it up over the years that the Buckley-Bellotti decisions led to this.
Yep.
Led to the Elon Musk and his ability and his ability to even undermine Trump if it comes to that. And I was just also going to ask you if the local courts get appealed up to the Supreme Court, do you think there would be 2 or 3 justices such as Roberts and maybe Gorsuch and Coney who might rule with a minority?
I doubt Gorsuch will. He's a hardcore partisan. His mother was Ronald Reagan's EPA chief who tried to dismantle the EPA and had to resign in disgrace. He has been a right-wing warrior his whole life, basically. That's why he's there. I think Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts may be at the point where they've had enough. And it'll be real interesting to see when this stuff gets to the Supreme Court. But I'm not making any predictions, Mark. Anything is possible right now. And like with, like Mitt Romney was talking about how, during that impeachment vote, the second impeachment vote for Trump, Romney told a reporter, and it was later reported in one of the books about Romney that was written, he told this reporter that he knew several Republicans who wanted to vote to impeach Trump, but they were afraid that their families, that their houses might get burned down, their kids might get harassed or beaten up or murdered or raped or something. They were just terrified of the violence that always follows Donald Trump whenever he identifies somebody with anger. And so that may well be a concern of the Supreme Court justices, too. We'll just have to see. Mark, thanks for the call. Kevin in Pearland, Texas. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
I'm fine. Kevin, I just noticed that I only have 25 seconds left. You got a quick one, or shall I put you on hold and pick you up in the next hour?
You can put me on hold. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Typically I try to give people at least a minute. But I just want to go back to my opening rant here today in this first hour. That yesterday, and again this morning, Hegseth did this again this morning at the European Security Conference. We now have a brand new policy. We are not supporting NATO. We are not supporting Ukraine. We are not an ally of Ukraine. We are a partner with Russia in deciding how Ukraine will be carved up to satisfy Vladimir Putin. And as I said in the opening of this hour, I think that is treason. We'll be back with Phil Ittner live from Ukraine on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today's book in our Thom Hartmann book club here is Resist: How a Century of Young Black Activists Shaped America by a Nigerian-American reporter, Rita Omoka. And this is from the introduction. It's titled African, American. I am African. I am American. Nigeria made me. Black America raised me. My roots dig deep in Nigerian soil, while America has nourished my branches for more than 2 decades. Yet the fruit I bear holds the essence of both lands. Like a tree nurtured by 2 suns, my identity defies simple categorization. It's a unique blend, a testament to the richness of embracing intertwined belonging. I belong to the Edo people. That's one of the hundreds of vibrant tribes that make up the rich mosaic of Nigeria. Though we share similar features, our identities are deeply infused by our ethnicity, dialects, and unique tribal customs. Our belief systems, Christianity, Islam, and other traditional religions, coexist, shaping our perspectives and enriching our communities. And while colorism permeates, the concept of race, as understood elsewhere, simply doesn't hold the same weight. Yet in the United States, my identity has been defined by this uniquely American construct of race. Those physical characteristics of skin, color, hair, facial features are prominent. My tribe holds no value. Despite this flawed framework, I've since come to wholly embody Nigerian American. I favor that designation because it pays homage to the 2 distinct individualities that make me, me. For years, though, those 2 identities felt at odds, at once fraught yet covetous of each other, as though pledging allegiance to one meant disregard for the other. Throughout, I never understood nor appreciated my American blackness the way I could have. A surrogate one, yes, but still there's a belonging there that I neglected. For black immigrants, I'd assume this is true for most immigrants, our identity in America of just being black without a sense of cultural home within that identity presents myriad confusions. In Nigeria, I am not a black girl. I'm not a black anything. I am my mother's last-born child and only daughter from Benin City in the southern region of Nigeria, just 250 miles south of the country's capital city, Abuja. I am the granddaughter of an unlettered woman who rose to run a small business as a local Guinness and Coca-Cola distributor. I am not this color relegated me to. This is what I've struggled with all these years, having one foot in and out of America's definition of who I am. Having one foot in and out of the many groups I find myself in, constantly toggling between 3 worlds: Black America, white America, and my Nigerian culture. Contending with this skin so problematic in America, skin that in Nigeria is synonymous with endless striving in a pursuit of excellence, I come from a history full of it. The stories our ancestors passed down to us were of kings and queens, colonization be damned. Stories of flourishing in gold and oil and gemstones. Academically and professionally, the grind for achievement was instilled in us because everyone strives for the same caliber of achievement. To go from a country full of this to one stripped of it for racially black people doesn't quench our thirst for progress or success. Many foreigners to America see what feels innate to the native. That newness breeds prospect and appreciation. Immigrants gravitate toward the idea that America carries out a true democracy. Though a marred one, it is better than none or fascism. Like many immigrants, Mom came to this country in 1992, wide-eyed and gazed upon its endless feast of opportunities and upward mobility, concluding that America provides for those who work hard. Fleeing from a corrupt government with lawlessness and instability, she quickly adopted this nation as a means of survival. And for some time, it all seemed so simple. When my brothers and I joined Mom in the South Bronx in 1995, her vision of America became ours, too. She charged us with representing our heritage exceptionally well. There's a Nigerian saying in our pidgin English, Naija no de carry last, which means Nigerians should never come in last place. That was Mom's core message to us: persevere and succeed. Race, racism, and the like were never discussed. They were never factors in our quest of American success. Our goal was to be ambitious and unwavering in our pursuit, even if it meant inadvertently ignoring America's complex history. By coming to America, we unknowingly became part of the Black American community. Though racially similar, there were deeply rooted differences between them and us. It's those generational and lived experiences that have long divided us. Their history of brutal oppression is one that we Black immigrants don't have, and one I didn't understand. It remains the wedge and genesis of tensions between Black Americans and Black immigrants. For the Black American, there's the endless fight to be equal to whites politically and economically. And for the Black immigrant, there's the romanticized view of America as a place of limitless opportunities. The book by Rita Omaka is Resist: How a Century of Young Black Activists Shaped America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hour 2 here on the Thom Hartmann Program. On the line with us is our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine, host of the brilliant podcast On the Edge, available wherever fine podcasts are found. And Phil, just a few minutes ago, Pete Hegseth was apparently asked at a press conference, this European Security Conference, what concessions Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are requiring of Vladimir Putin in order to negotiate some sort of peace with Ukraine. And this is a verbatim answer. This is exactly what he said. He said, well, that's, I would start by saying the arguments that have been made that somehow coming to the table right now is making concessions to Vladimir Putin outright, or that we otherwise, that the President of the United States shouldn't otherwise make. I just reject that on its face. What the hell? Yeah. So what's going on? How's this being taken over there?
I can presume how it's going to be taken over here. I can respond to what Hegseth has been saying since he's been on this side of the Atlantic, and that is that Ukraine is not going to play ball. Negotiations between Moscow and D.C., be what they may, will not resolve this conflict. Yeah. The Ukrainians will decide the resolution of this conflict, and they are damn sure they have conviction of that. I shrug my shoulders and I roll my eyes and I listen to the Secretary of Defense being Hegseth as opposed to Lloyd Austin, and I wonder where we are. And I am sorry to say this, and this is my personal opinion. I am not doing this as a reporter. I am doing this as an analyst and somebody who has lived in Ukraine for quite some time and covered this part of the world for quite some time. U.S. foreign policy is being dictated out of Moscow.
That's my take. I think, frankly, domestic policy is being dictated out of Moscow. I think that both Musk and Trump have been in regular contact with Putin. Putin wants to see the United States destroyed. And guess what? They're destroying the United States.
That's correct. And I tread cautiously here because I have been doing this for 20, 30 years. And I know what happens when I make declarative statements like we are being played by Moscow, that we are at war with Russia. And I know folks hate hearing that, but we are at war with Russia. And we are at war with Russia because Russia has decided they are at war with us, and we are not aware of it yet. It is not in our consciousness that we are currently in a hot war with the Russian Federation. And it is happening here in Ukraine, certainly, but it is also happening domestically within the United States. They have infiltrated our body politic. We are putting into positions of power people like Tulsi Gabbard and a number of different Kemp Paschal, go to as far as J.D. Vance, the vice president, and yes, go all the way up to the president of the United States. We are compromised. We have been attacked by Moscow, and it is effective, and it is working, and we are losing the war that is happening domestically within the United States of America. We're being attacked, Tom. We're being attacked. No short measure to it. We are under attack by the Kremlin, and there are willful, whether they are, useful idiots, fellow travelers, or indeed agents of the Kremlin. We are being attacked, and the appointments that the new administration are putting into positions of power undermine our security. They acquiesce to the Kremlin, and while Ukraine is the hot edge, the sharp point of the spear, make no mistake about it, the United States of America is under attack, and we are currently in a state of war with Russia, whether we like it or not, whether we like to persuade ourselves that we are not. I, having studied the Russians and lived in this part of the world and studied this part of the world for a very long period of time, this is not passive. This is not, these are not half measures. We need to wake up to the fact that the Kremlin, in coordination with a lot of members of the administration coming in, and this has been going on since Trump came down the escalator, and beforehand even, we need to wake up to this fact. This isn't just a domestic problem. This is an international problem. And the Kremlin is manipulating our body politic and attacking our body politic.
And they're doing it to the Germans, and they're doing it to the French, and they're doing it to the Brits, and the Swedes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we got to wake up.
Yeah.
And I've been saying this on your show for a very long time, and I wish I could say it more succinctly, and I wish I was more articulate about it, and I wish that people who listen to your show and the audience that you have kind of had the body of information that I have, and I'm grateful for people that are open to this perception. We got to wake up. This isn't a game. Our democracy is under threat. Western liberal democracy is under threat. We thought at the end of the Cold War that our system would go east. What has happened is that their autocracy and their corruption and their system of oligarchy has moved west.
Yep.
And the sooner we recognize that, and we're already in the 11th hour, we got to wake up to the fact that this isn't an abstract idea. This is really happening, and it is happening in our own country. Trump is, and I know people get really upset about this because of the faulty Mueller report, of all the efforts that have been done to dissuade Americans from recognizing this threat by minimalizing, by simply, paraphrasing the Brady Bunch for all intents and purposes, the whole, Russia, Russia, Russia. That is not a mistake. That is done purposefully to minimize the very real effect of Russian information warfare. They can't beat us on the battlefield. They need to beat us in our body politic, and they're winning.
Yeah.
They're winning. They're beating the hell out of us.
Yeah, I'm seeing it too.
And we need to recognize it.
I absolutely agree. All that said, Phil Ittner, What is the status of the war in Ukraine right now, or the Russian war against Ukraine, I suppose we should call it?
Well, look, on the ground in Ukraine, despite what folks would have you think, Ukraine is winning the war.
Which is why Putin is talking to Trump about, hey, let's end this war, right?
Right, and also talking directly between D.C. and Moscow and excluding Kiev.
Yeah,
that's a massive problem. They are making advances. The Russians are making advances militarily in the Donetsk area, but they are not making the kind of advances that they need to make to actually win the war. They are not going to, quote unquote, denazify Ukraine, which is not to say that Ukraine is a Nazi state. When they say denazify, they mean to upheave the.
They mean to end the sovereignty.
They mean to
put a
end
Lukashenko back, in charge.
That's right. That's right. They want a puppet government in Kiev. Now, if they don't get that, and if they don't get Odessa, which is the control point for the northern shore of the Black Sea, they will have lost this war, because it's all about naval power. It's imperialism and it's naval power. And if they don't have Kiev, which is the imperialism, and if they don't have Odessa, which is the geopolitical strategic power that would control their only warm water port, then they have lost this war. So they need to make more advancements than they are making on the battlefield currently. So if the war were to end today, they would lose this war. However, they could sell it to their own population if they are given guarantees that there is exactly what Pete Hegseth is going to Brussels and going to Munich and saying, which is to say, no NATO unification or partnership or being brought into the defense status of NATO. That the idea of 2000 and prior to 2014 borders, which is to say sovereign borders of Ukraine, that is no longer accessible. These are exactly what Moscow wants. And for Hegseth to come over here and say these things without even entering into negotiations, which is to say to surrender these major strategic goals of Moscow going into the negotiations. It's criminal. What are we getting in return? It is exactly what Moscow wants.
Yeah.
And so we need to recognize that we are really losing this war.
Yeah, this is the Sudetenland all over again.
And we are losing it not in terms of what's happening on the ground. We're losing it in terms of the smoky backroom deals that are being made that Hegseth and Trump want to have happen. The Europeans are recognizing that they need to step up. But I see that as a double-edged sword as well, because I think that Moscow ultimately would like to see a division between the transatlantic alliance. And I am seeing more and more that the Europeans are recognizing that America is a faulty partner, that it cannot be relied upon. And that sows division in the transatlantic alliance, which Moscow loves to see. Now, do I want to see a strong European defense alliance? Yes, I do. But I'd like to see it connected with America.
Yeah, I'm with you. Phil Ittner, check out his podcast, On the Edge. Thank you, Phil.
See you, Tom.
Yep. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
In reference to your highlighting Robert Reich's point that Mr. Trump is still holding those funds, and from the earlier call from a lady Victoria in the state of Washington about her low-income home energy assistance program monies being taken back after being paid to her for the power company, I'd like to add to that. My husband is the typical mom-and-pop landlord, and he has low-income tenants. one of whom gets Section 8 to pay his rent.
Mm-hmm.
That is impounded somewhere. And the payments
right now
for 10 years, they just start paying the money. Always, it's the first business day after the first of a month, the rent is deposited into the rental account.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there. Digging around, my husband has found out that it's on hold and it's all political. That's where the words quoted to him.
So they're freezing Section 8 funding as well out of D.C.
Yes, and obviously, who does that hurt? The landlord.
Right.
And then by
and ultimately, you're going to have all these people being homeless too.
Downhill, the tenant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You have landlords who have expenses. I mean, many people still have to make mortgage payments. Yeah. These units, no, but the utilities are coming out of my husband's accounts right now to keep this person, these people from freezing to death in our Idaho winter.
Right.
I just want to say it's happening. It's disgusting. And our theory is it's all part of a grab to make people divest their assets so somebody, with a corporate vulture attitude can come in and scoop it up at, bargain basement prices, as well as, adding to our homeless population. Got to say. But I do have an idea for Victoria. In our area, our for-profit power company, Idaho Power, who do our part of Idaho and Eastern Oregon, partner with the Salvation Army in a program called Project Share that also gives a similar amount of money for annual heating subsidy that they'll pay out if you apply. So I'm imagining in the state of Washington there's something similar for utility. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you in between our two states, Oregon and Idaho, there is something, that's an alternative. So far, it's not paid for by federal money. It's paid for by.
How long will that last when the federal money goes away and everybody turns to the state money and says help?
Oh, there won't be any. Our state, as soon as Trump put that hold on 3 weeks ago, our state government came out and said, we are not funding anything beyond what we have that we do not collect federal monies for. If the federal monies are not received, end of story, your check's not coming.
Wow.
That was a statement.
See, I keep saying that they're going to go after the poor people first because poor people don't vote and poor people don't speak out and poor people don't get covered in the news. And, they're not going to come after Social Security first. Social Security is going to be 5th, 6th, 7th down the line. Eventually, they'll come for it, probably in a couple of months, but not until first they've kneecapped everything else. Susan, thanks for that information.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good talking to you. 22 minutes past the hour. Incredible what's going on here, what they're doing to our country. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Well, actually, I've got a couple of news stories here to tell you, too. Stick around. We'll be right back. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say, fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out.
shut the gates, locked the doors, took the food from the kids, left the poor on the floor, said if you can't pay, you don't belong, while his friends count gold and toast to the con. He's tearing it down, brick by brick, ripping the spine from the government quick. Trump's last job, the final heist, leave the people starving while the billionaires slice.
25 minutes past the hour. So Louisiana's Attorney General Liz Muriel just signed an executive order yesterday against New York City abortion provider Dr. Maggie Carpenter. Dr. Carpenter this is an extradition order. They want New York City to surrender Dr. Carpenter, to Louisiana so she can be prosecuted for shipping abortion medication to a Louisiana teenager who then had an abortion. And Carpenter did nothing illegal. New York is a shield state that protects abortion providers, allows them to mail abortion medication without fear of prosecution. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, says there's no way in hell she's going to extradite Carpenter. So Louisiana, the Attorney General, Muriel, says the doctor needs to be careful with her travel plans. She says New York officials, including the governor, are not at liberty to ignore interstate compacts and laws regarding extradition. The doctor could be arrested in other places. If New York won't cooperate, there are other states that will. Can you imagine? These people are dead serious. They do not want women to have rights. They do not want women to have powers. They do not want women to have freedom. They want to take us back to 1971. They want to take us back to the time when women couldn't even get a credit card without their husband or their boyfriend or their brother or their father co-signing for them. When abortion was illegal, and half the different kinds of birth control out there were illegal. Basically, the only thing that was left was the rhythm method and maybe in some states condoms. They were outlawed. Condoms were outlawed in Connecticut, even for married couples. I mean, there was a Supreme Court case around this in 1965, I think it was, Griswold versus Connecticut. It was illegal for married couples to have condoms in their home. This is what they want to take us back to. And now the Republicans are telling us how they're going to pay for their tax cuts for the billionaires. I'll tell you about that after the break. And also, Musk's dodgy crew just straight up took $80 million out of a New York City bank account. Say what? I'll tell you about that, and I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us.
To the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with more of the news of the day and... Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice, I said to the people, "You cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human." Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. "You are not welcome here," he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So Richard Nixon was a crook, but not a lot of Americans knew that in 1960. But he lost to John Kennedy, not because he was a crook, but because he didn't know how to use television. He refused to wear makeup during the debates. Jack Kennedy understood television, and it was why he was so, widely popular. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to use radio in 1923, but Franklin Roosevelt did his fireside chats starting in 1933, just after he was inaugurated, and they were often listened to by a third of Americans. That's why he got reelected 3 times. He was elected 4 times to president. If Joe Biden had done the same thing during his 4 years, reaching all the American people every week, using social media, the new media, because that was radio and television back in the day, he would be in the White House right now, or Kamala Harris. There's a whole article about this, how Democrats need to get with the plan. They need to figure out how to use social media and get some charismatic candidates out there. Over at HartmannReport.com is titled Democrats' Fatal Flaw. Check it out.
Don't obey in advance, don't give them your will. Most of their power comes when you stand still. Defend what you cherish, the courts and the press. Stand with the unions, don't settle for less. Beware the one-party state. Vote while you can before it's too late. Take a stand, take the lead. This is the fight that freedom will need. How to fight tyranny, here's where it starts. With courage and truth and a fire in your heart. Resist their commands, let your voice ring clear. Freedom's a battle, but we hold it dear.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour. Mike Johnson, House Republicans yesterday released their budget plan. It would raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. You'll recall it's always the Republicans who are hysterical about the debt ceiling. And about the national debt. They always say, we've got to cut Social Security, we've got to cut Medicare because the national debt's too high. But they want to borrow another $4 trillion. And what do they want to do with that $4 trillion? They want to give $4.5 trillion in tax breaks to billionaires. Like Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They also threw in $2 trillion in compulsory cuts to Medicaid. Yeah, because, working poor people don't need health insurance. I mean, this is a more shameless version of the 2017 tax cuts. This is just obscene. It also calls for $880 billion in direct cuts to Medicaid, which provides low-cost health insurance to 72 million Americans, and would require states to either come up with the money to fund it themselves or slash benefits to recipients. It also calls for $230 billion in cuts to food stamps because, hey, poor people don't need to eat. That's a 20% cut to a program that feeds 42 million Americans every year. And by the way, where are most of these people living who are on food stamps and who are using Medicaid? The top states are West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. You think anybody in those states is going to realize that it's Donald Trump who's screwing them? The Republicans now say, this is, again, from yesterday's meeting where Mike Johnson came out and said, here's our budget. They want to reduce mandatory spending by $2 trillion. Now, what's mandatory spending? Mandatory spending is 4 categories. There are basically 4 categories of mandatory spending. Veterans benefits, Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. And they didn't say, how much they're going to cut veterans benefits or how much they're going to cut Social Security or how much they're going to cut Medicare, but they want to take $2 trillion out of those programs to pay for additional tax breaks for billionaires. As Jim Clyburn, the congressman from South Carolina, said, they have one agenda, stealing from the poor and giving to the rich. Speaking of which, New York City Comptroller Brad Lander. Now, the comptroller, he's like the bookkeeper for New York City, right? The treasurer for New York City. He just posted this. This was over on Blue Sky. This is just crazy. I'll just read you this is verbatim. He said, this morning, my financial team shockingly uncovered that President Trump and his crony Elon Musk illegally executed a revocation of $80 million in congressionally appropriated FEMA funding from New York City's bank accounts late yesterday afternoon. This is money that the federal government previously dispersed for shelter and services and is now missing. This highway robbery of our funds directly out of our bank account is a betrayal of everyone who calls New York City home. Absolutely friggin' incredible. And then, you know, the LIHEAP, the low-income heating assistance program, I just confirmed that. This is Alabama. People are, all across Alabama, people are getting notices that $100 is being taken out of their checking account that had been given to them to subsidize their low-income heating costs. And I mean, this is, here we are. You know, Steve Bannon told us this was coming in 2016. He said, we are going to deconstruct the administrative state. That is literally what they are doing. They are taking America apart right in front of us, and Vladimir Putin has got to be giggling so hard he is risking a hernia. So let's pick up your calls. Ardeen in Colorado Springs. Hey, Ardeen, what's on your mind today?
Hi. A few things. I was just wondering, where's Mike Lindau, the pillow guy?
I have no idea. He's probably desperately trying to rescue his little pillow empire.
His business. Yeah, I know. And it's like, Rudy Giuliani. It's like they're expendable to him, to Donald Trump.
Oh, he doesn't have friends.
So
he has temporary alliances or exploitational alliances, if that's a word.
Exactly. And it's so sad because that guy, Mike Lindau, he had a business.
Oh, he gave his life for Donald Trump. He's destroyed. Same is true of Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so sad. And and what baffles me is people like the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world. We're in Colorado, so hey, we got the Lauren Boeberts here. Do they not see that they're also expendable? Do they not see that what they're doing is, I mean, they're going to be thrown out with the other trash?
They all think they can ride the tiger.
Yeah, I guess so. It's so sad. And then another thing I was thinking, now this is part of my conspiracy. I'm building up my own conspiracy here. I actually don't think Donald Trump wanted the first presidency or the second presidency. I think he was doing it to generate some money. He was running low on money, and he thought it was a cash cow, and he thought he could get a lot of stuff. He wasn't in it for, he has no brain cells. We all know that.
Well,
I think he doesn't like to be thought of as stupid, and he was put in a position where it was out there that he's not the smartest guy.
No.
He's really not.
Well, with regard to his
his ego can't handle it.
His first term, he did not want to become president. He did not plan to become president. He did not expect to be president. He did that stunt coming down the escalator because NBC was paying Gwen Stefani $1 million a year more than they were paying him, and he was pissed off about it. And he wanted to say to NBC, for the next season of The Apprentice, you need to raise my paycheck. He did not expect. He didn't even have an acceptance speech written. I mean, he had no idea what he was doing. I think with the second term, though, he desperately wanted to be president because he knew that was the only way to stay out of jail. He was looking to go into prison.
Oh, yeah. Well, he got that taken care of because of the Supreme Court. But now I'm thinking he always puts people in charge. That's what he likes to do, and he got that from The Apprentice, I guess. He likes people to do the dirty work so that he could say, hey, hands up. I didn't do it. Yeah. I had no idea. Yeah. I did not know that. Yeah. So he's putting everybody in charge so he doesn't have to take the fall when we're all in a depression, not a recession, a depression.
Yep.
And then, it's coming. And then like Elon Musk, those two, I mean, if we need to have, what is that thing, that movie with the singer, where they're in a grudge match, Thunderdome. We need to have them. We need to stick them in and just say, fight it out, get it over with. We're done with you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
And I love the idea because Elon Musk basically bought the presidency.
No, he did, and he has now become the president. I mean, he's got his little kid. Apparently, people have taken this video apart. I made a joke about it the other day, but apparently it's true that his little kid walked up to Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office and said, get the shut your effing mouth. That's what he said.
I know.
He said, shut your effing mouth. And he only actually said the word, that I'm not going to say on the air. Dean, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Spot on. Wally in Portage, Indiana. Hey, Wally, what's up?
Appreciate you talking with me, Tom. It's always good to hear some intelligent dialogue for a change compared to other sources. I want to talk about the history real quick of the Republican Party as far as I can remember. I was born during Eisenhower administration, so I don't know much about that, but Nixon, Ford, Reagan, the Bushes, now Trump, every administration has scandalous corruption in it.
Yep.
And it's habit, and it isn't just the presidency. Yesterday, they're giving, Mitch McConnell was the only one to vote against Tulsi Gabbard on the Republican side.
Right.
Like he's the one who packed the courts.
I know. He's suddenly realizing that he has created a monster. If he had if he had just stepped back and not whipped votes against the Trump's impeachment, against Trump's conviction, particularly on the second time around, we would not be in this situation right now. And I think that Mitch McConnell has come to that realization, particularly after Trump has, in very racist ways, gone after his wife. I mean, it's amazing. Wally, thanks for the call. Spot on. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It is 46 minutes past the hour. Stay with us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the True People's Media. Back with your calls in just a minute. And welcome back. Kevin in Pearland, Texas. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing again? I just first problem is when people say they can't understand how all this is going on, they could never believe it. The black community has always believed it because we've lived it and witnessed it.
I get it.
If people stop romanticizing America's past, we can clearly see the future.
Yep.
For instance, people forget that, or I don't know if people even are aware of what was called the Bonus Army in 1932, where Hoover attacked veterans protesting outside of the White House.
Yeah, Douglas MacArthur led the charge on the back of a horse.
Exactly. Yeah. Him and Patton.
Yep.
And so we've always had a hatred for the non-rich, if you will.
Yeah.
And we call these people billionaires. Back then they called them robber barons. So we need to get back to labeling and shaming, and stop being so respectful to these people.
I'm with you. That's why I call them the morbidly rich, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of billionaires or whatever, the majority of them did not earn that type of money legally.
Well, half of the billionaires in America basically inherited their wealth.
Right. Definitely. And as far as the Democrats go that are not helping to stop this, it's because neoliberalism is just the other side of a Republican coin.
Yep.
That if we don't, there's two things I think we can do. One is definitely trying to get rid of Citizens United. And secondly, we need to increase the size of representation in Congress. There's no constitutional limit on the size of Congress. And what's happened is, as our population has grown, these people have taken more and more power in office because they're representing larger and larger amounts of people, which makes them less accountable.
Yeah, you're right, Kevin.
So,
now, there's no constitutional limit, but there is a legislative limit. It was put into place back, in the 50s or 60s, as I recall?
In the 50s,
yeah,
exactly, in the 50s. And they can go and change that limit, but we have to get the right people in there to do that.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's all I had.
Well, that's a good one. Kevin. I completely agree. And in fact, I think that I think your point that in particular, the one that really resonated for me, Kevin, was your point that black people have been seeing this forever. And white people are just so wrapped up in their idealism and their blindness about America. I'm struggling with how to communicate that to white people. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I can say is tell the truth, right? It's like the gospel. The gospel is the truth. And so, you know, it's just, no one said it would be easy, but when we go to school, we learn through rote and repetition, right? And so it's just having that same idea and same truth echoed again and again and again. Now, you will have those that refuse to believe it, but, you know, you're always going to have that 30% that don't want to support or believe.
Oh, yeah, of course. But, you know, hopefully we can marginalize them. Kevin, thank you so much. Great call.
You.
Appreciate it. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have two openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his attorney general, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, you know, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon two openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
Trump steps up, the cameras roll, he points and lays the blame, says the press is out to get him, playing a rigged game. Fake news, they twist the facts, they're enemies of me, but silencing the truth is how you kill democracy. Donald Trump is crushing the media, tearing down the light, turning facts to fiction, hiding wrong from right, calls them traitors, calls them liars, bends the story fast. When the truth gets buried, it echoes from the past.
Welcome back. 53 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Lynn in Los Angeles. Hey, Lynn, what's up?
Hello. Okay, first, something fun. The DOGE, or the DOGE acronym, stands for two alternatives. One, destruction of government by Elon.
Yeah, Robert Reich did that this morning. Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, and the second is Department of Gaslighting Everyone. So that was my phone.
I like that one too.
Yeah, it's good. It's easy to remember too. So the reason I have three suggestions for people that are looking for activism and talking points. But the first suggestion is to go to the Progressive Town Hall meeting on Sunday. Every Sunday they have meetings and guest speakers. On January 19th is recorded on YouTube. I suggest everyone go there and listen to Erica Payne of the Patriotic Millionaires, because she gives strategic ideas for mobilizing. And in particular, it's like Bernie says, yes, we can create an economy that works for all of us. Well, she suggests targeting strategically certain politicians, including, for example, in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, because right now there's a bill that they're, maybe voting on. It's called the One Fair Wage Act, and it's going to freeze the minimum wage for tipped workers at a lower rate. And it may sound good, but Erica Payne says everyone, all states should call Governor Whitmer and say, oppose that bill, right, because she cares about being president someday, so it won't just be the people in her state that she pays attention to.
I think she knows that. I mean, Republicans have seized back the Michigan legislature, haven't they? Didn't they do that in the last election?
I cannot speak to that, but I know that there's a bad Democrat. She referred to this guy, Kevin Hertel. He's pushing the bill, and he shouldn't be. It's very, it's corporate. But just really quick, everyone, please go to YouTube, use that tool, find progressive town hall meetings, recordings that might be interesting to you, and then if you want to, join live with us Zoom on Sundays. The second thing. Talking points for people who care about the U.S. Aid Department. A guy named Andrew Natsios, Natsios. He was a guest on February 5th, and he was an administrator for George Bush, and he headed that agency. He's a conservative Republican who says what they're doing is a really bad idea, and he points out things I haven't heard.
I totally get it. Lynn, thank you very much. Kenny in Santa Monica. Hey, Kenny, what's on your mind today?
Hello?
Hey.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Oh, yes. Hi, Tom. Good morning. Just a second. I just wanted to comment on your question about the lack of student protests regarding the Gaza issue. I have a daughter who was arrested at a university here in Los Angeles. I won't mention the name, but and she was charged with conspiracy.
Whoa.
And that has dampened the enthusiasm of a lot of these young protesters because they're facing possible expulsion from school for getting out there and
well, not to mention imprisonment and massive legal fees.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm looking at retaining an attorney now just to keep her in school. So that could be a reason why you're seeing
that makes a lot of sense, Kenny. That makes a lot of sense. Kenny, I got to run, but thank you for sharing that personal story with us. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're hitting the top of the hour here. I'll be back with you on the other side of the break. The State Department was planning to give Elon Musk, what is it, $400 million for armored Teslas? the plot thickens. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godse. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will provide some illumination. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on the birth certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from cyclical instability and financial crises, and it's the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life meant male breadwinners and female homemakers. But slowly, socialist championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the Leave It to Beaver ideal. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 spurred American leaders to rethink the costs of maintaining traditional gender roles. They feared the state socialists enjoyed an advantage in technological development, and why women have better sex under socialism.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. Well, last night on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow reported on the armored Tesla with great humor. I mean, you know, she was pointing out the Tesla Cybertruck when Elon Musk rolled it out. He was talking about how this thing is bulletproof. And so he had his chief engineer come out and throw a metal ball at the window, and it shattered the window. And then he did it again, right? It was hysterical. It was genuinely hysterical. But this was all in the context of it being reported that the department under Joe Biden had put out a request for bids for armored electric vehicles. They wanted to clean up. They wanted to get the Department of State vehicles off fossil fuels and put them on electricity. And that Tesla had initially apparently gotten the contract for $400 million for these things. Yeah, well, that was last night. This morning, that website that was listing that at the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, their fleet of roughly 3,000 armored vehicles, apparently that has vanished. The State Department removes Tesla's name from planned $400 million contract amid Musk scrutiny. Doesn't mean they're not going to get the money. It just means they're no longer talking about it. So we'll see. My guess is, though, that they don't want electric vehicles no matter what, and this is just a small drop in the bucket for Musk. I mean, he makes most of his Teslas in China for the Chinese market. That's where, at least with regard to Tesla, he's making a pile of money, and which may have something to do with why we are endorsing the idea that giant, great power nations can seize their smaller neighbors. You know, hey, Russia, take Ukraine. Hey, China, take Taiwan. Hey, America, take Greenland. I mean, you know, that's the direction we're going. Meanwhile, have you ever heard of the God Squad? I mean, it's not their official name. It's their kind of stage name. I don't know. But it is it's a committee that is led by the Secretary of the Interior, who is Doug Burgum, and 5 other senior officials from 5 different government agencies. And what they do is they get together and decide how to enforce or override the Endangered Species Act. In other words, you got an animal or a plant, typically it's an animal, that is at danger of extinction, and therefore a new office building can't be built, or a dam can't be built, or a marsh can't be drained, or whatever, because it would destroy the habitat and render that animal extinct or that plant extinct. And the Endangered Species Act says you can't do that. So this group, they call themselves the God Squad because they have literally the power of life or death over endangered species. They can get together and override the Endangered Species Act. And here we go. This is from The Guardian, Oliver Millman this morning. Donald Trump has already begun dismantling parts of the envied U.S. endangered species protections in his quest to boost oil and gas drilling in part using a panel with an ominous name, the God Squad. The Endangered Species Act, of course, was passed in 1973, signed into law by Richard Nixon. The Department of Interior has been tasked with allowing all previously refused drilling leases, including in the Alaskan Arctic, and with drawing up plans to review and, as appropriate, revise all withdrawn public lands. In other words, open up our pristine territories to oil and gas development. Now, frankly, I don't think this is going to be as big a deal as Trump thinks, because I don't think the oil companies want to do this, because it would reduce the price of oil. There's a glut of oil in the market right now because electric vehicles are proliferating all around the planet so rapidly. But nonetheless, this legislation so far has helped safeguard more than 1,700 species in their habitats, preventing 99% of all the species on the Endangered Species Act list from going extinct, including the bald eagle. But now Burgum, the head of the Interior Department, and Donald Trump, this is Noah Greenwald, he's the Endangered Species Director at the Center for Biological Diversity. He says, Burgum and Trump are strapping dynamite to basic rules that protect our natural world. Even as imperiled species dwindle and vanish across America, this order will fan the flames of the extinction crisis. Implemented, Burgum's order threatens to leave future generations with a greatly impoverished, hotter planet. It's monumentally short-sighted. Yeah, it's true. But hey, the fossil fuel billionaires are going to make another few $1 billion maybe another few $1 trillion over the next decade. So, and they give a lot of money to the GOP. I mean, it's fossil fuel billionaires who built the entire right-wing infrastructure. The Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, the Economic not EPI. Just the list goes on and on, right? The Competitive Enterprise Institute, et cetera. This entire, the ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, all tracks back to fossil fuel billionaires. So, hey, let them dig out a little more gas and oil and make another couple $1 trillion, and to hell with the environment, and to hell with average Americans, and to hell with the endangered species. This is what America voted for, apparently, if you believe that the election was fair. I don't, but this is what America voted for, apparently. It's insane. So what's on your mind? Mike in Chicago. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Tom, good afternoon. Really appreciate the program. As an older retired white guy, I feel like I'm going to school nearly every day.
Oh, well, thank you, Mike.
Hey, on the endangered species, nobody's ever accused the Republicans of understanding where they're going to put their foot down on the next step.
Yeah.
They seem to never have a plan with what they're doing. And I want to push back on something real quick that you had said before about McConnell perhaps knows that he's nearing the end of his tenure and he wants to try and make things look better.
Mm-hmm.
His vote, he knows his vote doesn't count. It doesn't really matter because there's enough on the other side if he goes the other way.
So he can make a gesture, a meaningless gesture.
I think it's just being done for show.
I think you're probably right, Mike, because this is a guy who used to whip votes. If he really and truly wanted any of these people not to be approved, not to be put into their offices, there's no doubt in my mind Mitch McConnell has enough political capital. I mean, he still controls tens of millions of dollars that gets passed out to members of Congress, of the Senate, that he could get other people on board, and he didn't. He failed to. So I think you're absolutely right, Mike.
Well, and they all could. And that gets back to what I just said before, that they're never really looking at the ramifications of what they're doing.
Right.
They don't understand that by killing off something as small as a snail, how it could wind up affecting them, because it's only a snail, Tom.
Yep.
Hey, the reason I was calling today, I actually called for the first time last week, and this is kind of echoing where I was at, because ain't nothing happening yet, but there's been more bad that's been happening about things.
Mm-hmm.
As I see it, my opinion, there's two things that we can do as citizens, as concerned citizens. We can mobilize. The other thing we can do is try to secure the vote. It seems that our elected officials have dropped the ball. Hakeem Jeffries, with his tears that he's been shedding over the fact that they have too many for office, is not alone. Quigley is my rep, and being in Illinois, obviously Duckworth and Durbin are my senators. I have raised the issue a couple of times, more than a couple of times.
Which
I
issue?
email and send stuff about mobilizing people.
Oh, okay.
And I think that part of the problem that you have it certainly doesn't start and end with elected officials. Managers in businesses, a lot of different places that I worked at throughout my career, they never seem to understand what their most valuable asset is, what their most useful resource is. They look at their inventory. Absolutely. They think inventory, machines, everything else. It is people.
Yeah.
People, because we're flexible, we can do a lot of different things, whether it's in business or holding a sign marching down Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
Yep.
But there's been crickets about this. They had that 50-50 march last Wednesday, which was in Springfield, and I didn't find out about it until the day of. And it's about 5 hours or 4.5 hours or so for me to drive down there, and I didn't know if I was going to do it anyway. But they're not doing anything to mobilize people. And I think one of the things that, if you look at Trump, one of the things that he understands very, very, he internalizes it, is numbers. When you look at the numbers of people from an overhead drone shot, and he can lie about that in his little mind, having 1 million people out in 4 or 5 different cities, we don't have to go to Washington. We don't have to travel far. If you get the people together in the cities and set marches up. But nobody's doing that.
Well, no, Indivisible actually is doing that, and there are marches going on, and there are protests going on literally all over the country. They just, by and large, the only media that I know of that's reporting on them is the Rachel Maddow program. So, you know, I think we've got a good start here, Mike, and I encourage you to check out indivisible.org. I think you'll be surprised on what actually is going on. But beyond that, I get and totally agree with your point. Thanks a lot for calling and making it. It's 16 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, it looks like Musk has succeeded in destroying the consumer, or overhauling the Consumer Protection Bureau, so he can roll out his new financial product on X. Insane. And welcome back, Randy in Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Randy, what's up?
Good morning, Tom.
Yeah.
Not quite, but anyway, I'm glad you keep up the good fight. You give us something to pay attention to and listen to.
Thank you.
I've got 2 quick comments on your recent stories before I get into my point. The first is take a look online at what people think, problems with Teslas. There are numerous problems. They should not be offered government contracts. My favorite perspective on them is to call them swastikars.
Yeah.
SWASTIKARS.
Yeah, that's all over the social media right now. Yeah.
So anyway, if you want to achieve one of the Russian goals of bringing down the economy of the United States, one of the best ways is to cast doubt on the safety of the banking system, which is exactly what happened when the Doggy Boys took money from New York State bank accounts.
Yeah.
If they can cause bank runs, they're achieving Russian goals. So it's just...
well, especially if they've destroyed the FDIC, which looks like it's also in their crosshairs. And the CFPB, I mean, that is what keeps banks honest. So, yeah. We're just watching the deconstruction of our government. I mean, they're tearing America apart. It's insane.
I agree. Now, if Democrats want to expand, here's a point I actually called to make, want to expand their base of support, we need to get back to the basics, the ABCs of the Democratic Party. And first, I'm asking listeners to think back all the way to the Bill Clinton times, because Democratic policies since then have basically been Republican programs just slightly liberalized.
I agree.
Take a look at Obamacare, for example. That was literally a program taken from a Republican state of Massachusetts, governed by Mitt Romney.
Yeah, it was put into place in Massachusetts. It was originally proposed by the Heritage Foundation, funded by fossil fuel billionaires. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton bought into neoliberalism, and Barack Obama tolerated it, and neither one of them. I would say the destruction of the Democratic Party to a large extent can be placed at the feet of these two guys. Randy, thanks for the call. Jen in River Forest, Illinois. Hey, Jen, what's up?
Hey, I was going to piggyback on one of your original points about I'm sorry, I'm like really nervous today, but Sue had commented about it too, as far as taking things away from people who need it and lie heap and programs such as that. Yesterday, I heard Elon Musk talking about, he made up, I'm guessing, a scenario about a woman who supposedly worked for the government but had $10 million in her checking account, and how they were going to look into this because somebody working for the government shouldn't have that amount of money. So that surely must signify fraud and stealing against the government. So now I see from what these two ladies had said this morning how this is going to affect people like me who work 3 jobs and still can't pay their bills, and I don't qualify for LIHEAP because I make too much money, quote unquote. They are going to start taking back money from programs like LIHEAP, that $100 payment. That is going to in turn put people's account negative. And believe me, I had 2 overdraft charges against my bank account that I've had to do endless door dashing just to cover. It's going to spin this country out of control, and it's all the rich people will survive. They'll do fine, but all the people on programs, they're going to exterminate.
Jim Clyburn was absolutely right. These guys are stealing from the poor to give to the rich, and that is their prime directive. It is their pole star. It is their North Star. It is the only thing they give a damn about. Jen, thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Well, it's the brand new Confederate States of America, plantation politics. You know, the old Confederate States, today known as MAGA America, the new Confederate States, were devoted to making America as white as possible, stripping women and minorities of political and economic power, gutting workers' rights, rigging election outcomes, their leaders nakedly taking bribes, using the phony veneer of Christianity to justify brutal policies, including slavery, making queer people invisible, reconfiguring schools for indoctrination, having their militias terrorize minorities and their opponents, and maintaining a government of, by, and for rich white men. And these are the principles, the core principles around which the modern-day GOP has reorganized itself. You can find an entire article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled The Plantation Politics of MAGA America. Is this the future we want? Check it out.
Five men in black robes took the gavel and lied, said money's got a voice and the people got denied. Turned speech into dollars, turned votes into gold, sold out our future while the nation got rolled. $1, 1 vote, that's the game that they played. Now the rich make the rules and the rest get betrayed. They gutted our rights, threw them out in the street. Now democracy's drowning in a dark money sea. The billionaire coup is complete, no one stopped it. 5 on the court and people just lost it. Bought off the ballot, sold off the land. Now the law's just a weapon in a rich man's hand.
23 minutes past the hour. Yes, the law is a weapon in the rich man's hand, indeed. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. Yeah, Hope Sound, Florida. Hey, Mike, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind?
Hey, it's my pleasure, Tom. Let me tell you, you have the smartest callers. I hate to break that trend, but I'm gonna do my best.
Okay.
Listen, you had a gentleman from Texas named Kevin, and he cites history, he cites facts. Unfortunately, history and facts are no longer important, but I want to go back to one thing in particular. You had the gentleman from Ukraine talking about how this is a war. This is a hot war with Russia, based on what Russia has done to Ukraine and what they've done in this country. I need to stress that because he's not being hyperbolic, but I need to add this. We've been at war with Russia. We've been at war with red voters. We've been at war with non-voters. we've been at war with third-party idiots. Now, we're outnumbered, Tom, and I've said this 10 years ago before Trump won the first time. When Mitch McConnell stole the Supreme Court, we need to start thinking about organizing as a blue nation. That doesn't mean we separate, but that means we need to think like warriors. These are not our friends. These are not lovers of democracy. You know better than everyone that we're dealing with fascists. Now, the one thing that people like you and many callers don't want to face is, how do you take care of fascists? No offense, but if you know your history, it's usually violent. And I don't want it to get to that. We need to be strong. We need to stop blaming everything on the Democratic Party. Yes, there are massive failures from the Democratic Party, but it's up to the people now to do something. And making phone calls ain't enough. We can stop this tomorrow, Tom, if we form economic boycotts, if we bring this country to its knees, which they're going to do without us. But we need to show these people we're not messing around. If they want to divide this country up permanently, well, they're going to get what they want, because it's going to happen with or without us if we don't stand up. And I live in Florida, Tom. I'm really tired of seeing signs that say God, guns, pro-life, and Trump. I can't put vote blue on my car without having to buy a gun to defend myself. Yeah. And that's not hyperbole. That actually happened to me in the last 10 years, that I can't put vote blue on my car without somebody trying to confront me physically. And when that happens, you better wake up, and I don't mean you personally, you're fighting the good fight. But let's stop pretending that everybody's going to be like Neville Chamberlain. Start thinking like Churchill, and let's deal with this, and start facing members of your family, friends, coworkers. Face them down. Tell them I don't want to engage with you anymore, personally or business-wise. It may sound un-American to do that, but we're long past the point of trying to analyze these people and make them turn.
Yeah,
they can't be.
I get it. Louise and I decided to go
Tom.
out for lunch to a local Mexican restaurant yesterday, and got out on the freeway, and the pickup truck in front of us had two bumper stickers. One said F, only it spelled out the word Democrats, and the other one said F Biden. I was just, horrified. Mike, I'm with you. I get it. Thank you very much. And, he's just driving around without a care in the world. We'll be right back with more of your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with your calls. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jeffrey Sachs, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. This is from Chapter 13. It's titled, Restoring Trust in American Governance. More than any other threat facing America is the collapse of civic virtue, meaning the honesty and trust that enables the country to function as a decent, forward-looking, optimistic nation. The defining characteristic of the 2016 presidential election is that neither candidate was trusted. The defining characteristic of American society in our day is that Americans trust neither their political institutions nor each other. We need a conscious effort to reestablish trust by making fair play an explicit part of the national agenda. We have already noted the collapse in public confidence in the federal government. The collapse of trust in each other is equally striking. For decades, pollsters have asked America whether most people can be trusted. And for decades, the proportion answering in the negative has been rising. There are probably two main reasons for this downward trend. The first is the sharp widening of income inequalities since the 1970s. The second is the widespread feeling that those at the top of the heap in income and power regularly abuse their wealth and influence. Donald Trump's relentless assertion in the 2016 campaign that the system is rigged, a claim that resonated widely despite the obvious irony that Trump himself had been a relentless rigger of the system. The system is indeed rigged for the big corporate interests, such as the drug companies that set drug prices 1,000 times the production cost. It's rigged for the large IT companies, such as Apple, that deploy egregious tax loopholes that enable them to park funds overseas in tax-free overseas accounts. It's rigged for the hedge fund managers who take home hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and then face a top income tax rate of 20%, far below what others, vastly poorer Americans, must pay. It's rigged for the investment bankers that deliberately cheated their clients and then walked away with a mere slap on the wrist, if that. And the fact that the Clintons parlayed public office and a family foundation into a vehicle for vast personal enrichment was not lost on an unhappy and distrustful electorate. Considerable social science research in recent years has given laboratory evidence to an ancient truth that power and wealth do indeed corrupt. Consider a fascinating psychology experiment recently published in Nature, a leading scientific journal. The employees of a major international bank were divided randomly into two groups, a control group and a treatment group. Both groups were given forms to fill out at the start of the experiment. The control group was asked general questions. The treatment group was asked questions about their role in banking. Then each group was asked to flip coins and report honestly how many heads they flipped, being told that a greater number of heads would lead to a higher monetary reward. The control group reported that they flipped around 50% heads, an honest report. The treatment group claimed to have flipped around 58% heads, a dishonest report that exaggerated the proportion of heads flipped. The conclusion? Simply by being reminded that they were bankers by filling out the form about banking, the treatment group was spurred on to cheat. The psychologist concluded that the business culture of banking within that representative bank was a culture of cheating and greed. One feels that America is like that today, especially at the top. This is an age of impunity, a time when the rich and powerful get away with their misdeeds and are even lauded for them in some quarters. Donald Trump met the accusation that he had not paid income taxes for years with the response, "That makes me smart." Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein met the charge that his bank had cheated its customers with the response that they were, quote, doing God's work. Hedge fund manager John Paulson was celebrated on Wall Street for his cleverness in conspiring with Goldman Sachs to bilk a German bank out of hundreds of millions of dollars. The leaked emails show how the Clintons mixed their private, public, and foundation activities and simply confirm for many unhappy Americans that this is how the system works. The United States Supreme Court has shamelessly fed this impunity. In the infamous Citizens United case, the Supreme Court shockingly equated anonymous corporate contributions to political campaigns with free speech. The court demonstrated that it had no realistic sense of how such corporate contributions have undermined the legitimacy of our political system. In a more recent case, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction of former Virginia Governor Robert McDonnell, who had been convicted of fraud and extortion for taking gifts from a businessman promoting his health products to the state. McDonnell walked away free from a shoddy and egregious abuse of office. I've noted repeatedly that these other high-income countries do not face these same trends. The U.S. pattern of rising inequality, falling trust, and increasing money in politics is not simply a reflection of the times or an inevitable side effect of democracy in the 21st century. Indeed, while many other countries are caught in a similar spiral of rising inequality, falling trust, increasing corruption, many others are not. Canada, for example, has successfully avoided these extremes, even though we share a common North American economy and a 3,000-mile border. Decency and trust can be maintained even in our complicated, globalized times. While there's no magic wand to restore social trust in the United States, there are important guideposts for citizens, businesses, and public officials. I suggest 6 key steps. First, we should acknowledge the dangerous hold of the lobbyists and the super rich on the political process. While many incumbents in office today will not sever their ties with their campaign contributors, citizens should sever their ties with politicians who rely on such contributions. So the book is Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable by Jeffrey Sachs. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
Roses are red, the markets are blue. Elon said take over, I said we're through. Trump sent a tweet, thought he could woo. But baby, I know a scam when it's new. You promised me Mars, a moonlit escape, but all that I got was a tax cut reshaped. You ghosted your workers, you left them to fight, then flew off in rockets. Boy, that ain't right. Billionaires ain't my Valentine. They steal my heart, then privatize. Break my union, sell me lies. Swipe my rights like NFTs. Goodbye.
36 minutes past the hour. Yep, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, too. It really is. It is snowing like crazy here in Portland. I hope you're safe wherever you are. We're all scratching our heads about how we're going to get home today. It looks like there's about an inch. The snow is going horizontal. I mean, it's just wild winds. We got a full-on storm here. So, and whatever happens here, the next day happens in the Rockies, and then the next day happens in the Midwest, and then the next day happens on the East Coast. So get ready. This is a hell of a storm. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay, you were talking about Alabama and Alabama Power.
Yeah.
Okay. Katie Britt had a fit, like Rachel said. You know, they also took $518 million away from the University of Alabama and Birmingham research program.
Yep.
Closing the Red Arsenal up by Gadsden, that's 35,000 jobs. There's been problems with it anyway because the Coosa River runs through there, and they've dumped too many chemicals in it. And so I would be very happy if it was closed. Mm-hmm. That river comes south. Yeah. But Alabama Power goes to what's called the Public Service Commission, which is in charge of services.
Right.
And they got their $7 a month. This is the third year of 10 years for us to pay for the conversion from coal to natural gas. They also charge us $10 a month for the high cost of natural gas. Plus, we have been paying 2 to 3% every year. They're not telling us this year how much to clean up the coal ash ponds, which they have dumped in a hole in the ground next to Mobile, which has made them angry. They want them to clean it up. We'll probably pay for that. And we have always, for the past 20, 25 years, paid another 1.5% was what it started out as, to replace the power poles and the lines during storms and stuff, which that came down last night in a little town called Deatsville. They don't have any power today.
Oh, no.
We had a bad storm go through. Yeah, tornado warnings and everything. We got another one coming through tomorrow night. And now they also have included another 5% for the cost of purchasing another power station somewhere here in Alabama. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be paying for them to build a reservoir on the top of Chandler Mountain in St. Clair County. That will be one of 5 dams they're also building. They're going to move all the people out of that area away from the mountain to put these 5 dams in to create more power.
What's the point of all this, Norma?
Money.
Oh.
Money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, actually, if you add it all up together, we were paying additional 30% on our bill every month for power.
To allow this company to expand the deal?
Well, it also means that anybody who has stock never has a decrease in their quarterly dividend checks. And so, yes.
This is a for-profit
And
company. In other
yes,
words, it
it
controls
is.
your utilities.
Yes, and it's a subsidiary of the Southern Company.
Oh,
which
geez.
also,
Okay.
yes.
So you're probably also helping subsidize some of their nuclear plants.
Yes, of which Japan has, what, 40%?
I don't know.
Because they
but
built them?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, uh-huh. Okay, well, I just lost my thought. But
I'm sorry.
anyway, also here, when you take the money away from the SNAP card, a lot of these elderly white women whose husbands have passed away and are now receiving the reduced Social Security check called a widow's portion have SNAP cards.
Yeah.
I got into a long discussion last night with some people online. They were actually friends of my elder sister, discussing Social Security. These people are convinced that there is immense fraud in Social Security by all those people who do not deserve checks, particularly those so-called fake Social Security disability checks.
Right.
Trying to teach these people is a pain in the neck, and that's not the word I want to use. And so I was getting cussed out online last night. But also, if you're probably unaware, but we are trying to do with an economic blackout on February the 28th. We're asking people, do not shop online, do not shop in stores, but between the hours of noon and midnight on February the 28th, which is the last day of the month and a Friday.
Right.
So go ahead and pay the bill you have to.
So who's
But don't
we, Norma?
buy-
Who's the we that is at calling?
This is a group. This is a group that's coming out of North Carolina, and my mind just went blank. But we're trying hard to make these people understand that they depend on us for their profit.
Right.
We also are having a protest on February the 17th, which is President's Day. That's going nation. I think that the Indivisible is behind that, but I am not sure, so I shouldn't say it probably.
Yeah.
But there's going to be protest nationwide.
Yep.
And so if you actually care about what's going on, look in your local area.
Yeah.
Call your Democratic Party or...
Yeah, I'm with you. And check out indivisible.org, too, because they are organizing these things.
Well, I'm in it. I joined that.
Yeah, good.
But
Norma.
this economic blackout, let these people understand that you don't get your profit without us. You don't want to pay us anything. You know, you want us to work for nothing, but you expect us to spend money.
I got it. Norma, I have to move along, but thank you for, as always, your passion and your information, and I wish you the very best. Thank you for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to mention is that John Fugelsang, for over years, had a program called The God Squad on Wednesday nights.
Right.
And he has, clergy on, and they're so plain-spoken, they swear a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, he still has a show on Sirius XM, doesn't he, in the evenings?
Yeah, every night. And as a matter tonight, on Thursday nights, he has the only Native American show with people on it talking about their scary past and stuff.
John is one of my favorite human beings. He's just an extraordinary man. I've known him for years. I'm not super close to him, but I've always admired him. And both his intellect and his passion and his talent. He's very talented.
Very good and quick, yeah. One of the other things that's funny, I want to know if you had ever seen the film clip Adolf Schicklgruber doing the Lambeth Walk.
No, don't know what you're talking about.
Well, in the 30s, someone took Leni Riefenstahl's clips of, Hitler,
Triumph of the
Will,
movie,
about the games and everything, and they edited it sort of Monty Python-esque, where you have troops marching backwards and forwards and Hitler's hand going up and down, and it's pretty funny. It's a film short, but it's called Adolf Schicklgruber doing the Lambeth Walk, which was a popular dance of that day.
Sure.
Anyway.
Interesting.
But what's bizarre to me is trying to understand mass psychology and crowd psychology. To me, it's the same thing, crowd psychology, because everyone's on the internet at the same time. And it's so complicated, and there's so many different aspects to it about people who they become part of the crowd, they lose their individuality and their responsibilities, and they sort of, subjugate.
Yeah, we're sort of like grasshoppers in that regard. You get a big enough crowd, and we lose our individual identities. This is something you see in warfare. It's something you see in sports. I mean, look at the Super Bowl.
Right. And then there's something that happens in the crowd where there's these people who are very aggressive and, full-on Nazi, whatever, who are handing out the poison.
Yeah.
And then people become submissive and they believe everything that happens. And in Russia, 100,000 people have died and no one said a word. They are so, intergenerationally.
Well, they're also terrified. They've got a dictator running their country. But I get your point. Bill, thank you for calling and making it. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with more of your calls. And welcome back. Jim in Riverside, California. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Tom, just want to kind of vent my frustrations here. It seems to me like nobody seems to be listening. You try to talk to these people on the right, they just don't want to go along, listen to you.
Well, odds are you're not talking about what they care about, Jim. If you were to trash talk black people, you'd probably their ears would perk right up and you'd have a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm serious. You try to talk to these right-wingers and talk to them about, Social Security or full employment or inflation or anything else, and they're voting for Trump because they hate black people. It's real simple. And brown people and Asian people and queer people. Yeah. They're friggin' bigots.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Tom, that I'm concerned is the problem is who's going to straighten this thing out after the 4 years? I mean, nobody seems to be talking.
I know, Jim. It's the damage that he has already done to this country in 3 weeks is just breathtaking.
I'm an 85-year-old guy, just sitting out here. I've had hip surgeries and what have you, and I had a 94-year-old brother that was totally to the left all of his life. In fact, a pledged socialist. And, he's gone now, but, and he was really concerned all of his life,
Yeah.
And just the way it is with me. And it's just going to be tough to figure this thing out, and the people don't seem to care.
It is. No, I totally get it. Jim, thank you. I share your concern, and that's next step. But right now we got to stop these SOBs. Jim, thanks for the call. Alex in San Pedro, California. Hey, Alex, what's up?
Happy New Year, Mr. Hartmann.
Thank you. Back at you.
Question. This, or I guess statement. This deficit, and we got to cut, and everything, and I don't get it. No, we don't. Isn't it time that rich people pay their taxes, the corporations pay their taxes, and what do you know? The deficit is paid.
Well, this is, this is the echo of the Reagan Revolution, that rich people don't need to pay taxes. Leona Helmsley said it very well. Only little people pay taxes.
Yes, but then again, that's what they say in these things, but the Constitution says something else, and there's something more important to that.
Yeah.
These people who they don't want to pay their taxes are parasites. Why can't they see themselves as that? Why can't they feel, my God, I'm this guy, the Ford guy, my country made me rich. I'm going to get back taxes. I'm going to get back some this.
Because one of the things we know about psychology is that the more wealth or power or both that people have, the less compassion they have. It drives psychology. It's a fascinating science, but
I understand that. There's a mixture like with alcoholism, but when they get a bunch of money, they get a euphoria, and I need to do this again.
Oh, it's addictive. It's addictive. Wealth and power
that's
are
never mentioned either.
Yeah,
but that's never mentioned either. These things are mentioned. Maybe we can help solve these problems. And
Native American communities understood this. They called it Wetiko. They viewed it as a mental illness, this hoarding syndrome. Yeah, spot on.
So we're just repeating history over and over.
Oh, we absolutely are, Alex, and we need to wake the hell up from it. Alex, thank you. You put your finger on it. I appreciate the call. It's 49 minutes past the hour and a half, and I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with us. More of your calls right now. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had a piano, and I loved to play it. I was incompetent, but I was figuring out all kinds of stuff. And then I kind of got away from it and, went to school and things got busy and just lost track of it. Well, now there's this fascinating new study out of the University of Geneva, Switzerland, that is making me think maybe I should go back and learn the piano. What they found was that they took a group of 132 healthy older adults, retired, 62 to 78 years old. Half of them learned the piano, half of them took music classes without learning the piano. And what they found was that those who learned the piano actually had the strongest increase in their memory, in their mental competence, their mental faculties. Those who took the music classes also did well, but learning the piano was a huge step. So check it out. There's a whole long rant about this over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
Turn off that channel, it's filling you with lies, spreading fear and anger beneath those polished ties. They twist the truth and bend the facts, it's all a grand disguise. Don't let them rot your mind away, don't buy their alibis. Don't listen to Fox, so-called news. It's misleading, it's wrong, it's designed to confuse. It will watch your brain and make you mean. Turn off the noise and say the truth unseen. They profit from division and from the seeds of hate. They turn our friends to enemies and twist the public fate. They shout with indignation while hiding what is true. Don't let them take your kindness. Don't let them poison you. Don't listen to Fox.
Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Thomas in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Hey, Thomas, thanks for listening to WHMP. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Great to hear from you. Thanks for doing the good work.
My pleasure.
What's up? I will be brief. Is now the time for a government shutdown? There's a budget meeting on the 17th of March.
Yeah, the government shuts down on the 14th, or runs out of money on the 14th. It starts shutting down the week after that.
Would that be a good thing if the Democrats forced that to happen?
I think so.
Is that an effective strategy? It just seems that nothing has any teeth anymore, and it feels like we're running.
I think the Republicans are going to force it because they can't pass a damn budget. And if the Democrats, again, we're seeing these appointees get into office with votes from Democrats, which is in the Senate, which is making me insane, and the Democratic senators refusing to do it. Tommy Tuberville held up military promotions for a whole year just because he was upset about abortion in the military, and you can't find a Democrat who's willing to hold up anything right now. It's infuriating, but that said, it looks like Republicans are not going to be able to get their own budget together. Whether they're going to do a continuing resolution, whether Democrats will cave and go along with them on it, we'll find out in 3-4 weeks.
Okay, cool. I just wanted your take on it.
Yeah. Keep your eyes open here, Thomas. Thanks a lot for the call. Beachside Bill in Orlando. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Afternoon, Tom. Hope everybody's well. I'm here in SpaceX County here, where SpaceX launches like every other day. We have one going up this Saturday, so I take the videos of them. I unfortunately do Elon Musk a favor every time, but that's a whole other story. I'll be quick. 2 quick things. Caller from Alabama, a couple callers ago, she is right on because it happens here in Florida. We have a public service commission, and that's a whole other story for another day. But my point is, you've known your share of alcoholics over the years. I had my problem with mine many years ago. What concerns me is this Pete Hegsbreth, the defense secretary. Now, I notice this guy. I watch everything about him. Every drink he has, every word
he was slurring his
says.
words a couple nights ago, apparently.
Was he? I didn't know about that.
That's what I saw on social
point.
media.
Yeah.
I can't independently verify it, but yeah, it was all over social media. Hegseth is out there talking and he's slurring his words, and I was like, oh God, here we go.
You know
Alcoholism is
alcoholics,
tough,
Tom.
It's really tough.
Yeah,
tough to shake. It's a serious addiction.
It really is. But the thing is, this man is the head of our Defense Department, and one wrong move, one slur of the word, like you said, and I don't think he's going to last long, Tom. I'll be honest with you. I think something's going to happen.
I think he will.
You think he will?
He's doing exactly what Donald Trump wants. I mean, he just caved into Putin. It's like Putin is running our foreign policy, and Hegseth is going, yeah, I'm with that. He gave this obscene speech this morning at the European Security Council in Munich, and he appears to think that national security, is entirely dependent on who's got the biggest military. I think it's a variation on who's got the biggest penis in his mind, and he completely ignores soft power. He's happy that they're shutting down USAID. We've already had 2 countries now say, okay, screw you, America. We're going to hook up with China. Because you're not helping us anymore. I mean, this guy, the entire Republican mentality, this entire macho Republican mentality is just sick. Bill, thanks for the call. Bill in Mason, Wisconsin. Hey, Bill, you got the last minute here. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to suggest that liberal and progressive media start referring to Trump as what he really is, the Manchurian candidate.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, that was a short one. Okay, you got it, and I'm on it. And I do think, let me just add here to what Bill just said. I do think that ever since the 1980s, Donald Trump has been enthralled to Russia. His first wife, her father, was a Russian security agent, a KGB, informant. They went over to Russia in the 1980s, and the KGB took him under their wing. And they said, that NATO is terrible and et cetera. Trump came back to the United States, went up to New Hampshire, gave a speech as if he was running for president, bought an ad in 3 major newspapers, and, calling for us to dump our allies and pull out of NATO. I mean, it's incredible. I think he is a Manchurian candidate. I really do. Anyhow, we'll be back tomorrow. Anything Goes Friday. Same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Stay safe, especially if you're up here in the Pacific Northwest. Drive carefully, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.